Hereby called to order. Could we have a pledge of allegiance, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Germain?
Here.
Massey?
Here.
Lutz?
Here.
Valangero?
Here.
Kathy?
Here.
Chair Owens?
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam Chair?
Okay, the agenda for tonight is the Kaiser Permanente Medical Center project. We're here for the request, number 1, for the certification of an environmental impact report, request for approval of amendments to the Emeryville general plan, approval of a rezoning from medium-density residential to plant unit development, commercial included, applications for a preliminary development plan for the Phase 1 site and future expansion site, the final development plan for Phase 1A, the hospital portion of Phase 1A site, a development agreement with the City of Emeryville for the proposed Kaiser Permanente Medical Center project of an approximately 30-acre site generally bounded by San Pablo, Park, Hollis, 45th, 53rd, and Doyle Street. Before we get into the meeting and before staff starts to go through the agenda, I want to set some of the ground rules. People who wish to speak tonight are asked to fill out speaker cards. They are out front. They are little blue cards. And you can do it during the next hour or so while the presentations are being made. I'm going to be calling the names as we go along, 5 at a time. And with those 5 speakers, please line up over there so we can expedite the hearing. Each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes. We had originally intended to maybe only let everybody talk for 3 minutes because of the length and the subjects and the timing of the topic tonight. But I decided in fairness and because we want to hear everybody who wants to say and who wants to speak, we will give everybody 5 minutes. However, we will not extend the time. Nobody will speak more than 5 minutes, and we would appreciate that everybody adhere to that timing. And we will also not allow anybody to give their time to anybody else to speak. If you want to speak, you have to do it yourself. We wish to listen and to hear as many people as possible, and everybody will be restricted to 5 minutes. There are also still copies of the response of the comment documents available for review outside, and they are located at the tables outside. And there are also more copies to be obtained at the Planning Department at 2200 Powell. And also, if you would like to be added to the mailing list, there are sign-up sheets outside to do so. Let me see, where are we? Okay, we're going to be taking a break at 8:30, and then again at 10:30 and 11:30 we will decide where we're at with the length of the speakers and as to how far into it we are to complete this project. So I am now going to turn this meeting over to staff. Ms. Quinn, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. My name is Gay Quinn, and I'm the Emeryville Planning Director. I'd like to provide a brief overview of the agenda we will be following tonight and to introduce to you those individuals who will be making presentations. As you all know, Emeryville's staff is very, very small, and this project is very, very big. And the fact that we're here tonight is the result of some extraordinary teamwork between city staff and our consultant teams. This team has been working on this project for over 19 months, and in my experience, you will never find a more dedicated, motivated, and competent group of people. It's taken a great deal of cooperation and a lot of late-night hours, but I just want to say as planning director, it has been a rare privilege to work with such a hard-working group of people. I will be introducing the individuals of our team in the order, essentially, as they will be making presentations this evening. First, I would like to introduce Mike Biddle, City Attorney. Mike, can you raise your hand? Mike and the legal team that the city has retained of McDonough, Holland, and Allen are here tonight to provide the legal framework for the issues that the Planning Commission will be asked to decide upon. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our special counsel, Dave Beatty, Don Harris, and Natalie West. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce the project applicant, Representative Kip Edwards. Kip, can you raise your hand? And Kaiser will be making a presentation this evening, and Mr. Edwards will be introducing the other members of the Kaiser team. Alicia Guerra of David Powers and Associates will be the city's environmental consultant, will provide information on the final environmental impact report that the Planning Commission is being asked to certify this evening. And I'd also like to acknowledge our traffic engineer, Corvey Engineering. We have Dennis Strucker and Linda Lee. And also our former Public Works Director, Harry Hecht, is here. Harry has agreed to continue to assist the city in his role as traffic engineer on this project, and all of the team members will be available to answer questions this evening. On my right is Scott Steinward of Public Affairs Management, the city's planning consultant. He will be presenting information included in the staff report. And I'd also like to acknowledge Kay Wilson of Public Affairs Management and Dee Dee Dolan, who I believe is in the anteroom. Kofi Bonner, the Director of Economic Development and Housing, will be providing information on the proposed development agreement, as well as background information on the redevelopment actions that are being proposed for this project. And finally, the person who's really kept this project and me on track is Ann Grice, the Planning Department Secretary, and she is outside by the table assisting the public with the records that they might want this evening and the sign-up sheet. And with that, I would note that following the presentations, the Commission will be provided an opportunity to ask questions of all the team members and the applicant. The chair will then open the public hearing so that we can hear from those of you who have taken time out of your busy schedules to let us know how you feel about this project. At the end of the public hearing, the Planning Commission will be asked to take action on a recommendation to the City Council as to whether or not to certify the EIR and whether or not to approve, conditionally approve, or deny the project applications. The project applications before the Planning Commission this evening, if I can just refer to the staff report that we've sent out to the commissioners, include certification of the final EIR, approval of a mitigation monitoring and reporting program, approval of amendments to the Emeryville General Plan, approval of a rezoning to planned unit development commercial, and that rezoning would include a preliminary development plan for the Phase 1 site and future expansion site, and a final development plan for Phase 1A, which is the hospital building. The Commission is also being asked to consider approval of a development agreement between the City and Kaiser regarding the Phase 1 site, which would vest Kaiser's approval for a 30-year term and provide long-term assurances with respect to development of the project, and would obligate Kaiser to perform specified requirements and conditions. The Kaiser applicants are requesting adoption of certain findings associated with the above project approval, including a statement of overriding considerations. And all of these issues are described in great detail in the staff reports that you have been given, and we will be providing additional details in our presentations this evening. And at this point, I would stop to ask if there are any questions of the Planning Commission on the presentations that you'll be hearing tonight.
Anybody have any questions at this point?
If not, I'd like to turn it over to Mike Biddle, who will, with his legal team, describe the legal requirements that the Planning Commission must operate under.
Initially, I'd like to turn it over to Don Harris to go through the CEQA process.
Good evening, members of the Commission. I'd like to take just a couple of moments to explain to you some of the CEQA-related actions that are before you this evening. I should start by explaining that the City and the Redevelopment Agency have adopted the state CEQA guidelines as the local guidelines for both the City and the Redevelopment Agency. Specifically, Section 15202 of those guidelines provides that public hearings are not a required part of the CEQA environmental impact adoption process. However, Guideline Section 15201 encourages public participation as an essential part of the CEQA process. And so we're really here this evening asking you to comment on and to recommend certification of the EIR to the City Council as part of an intent to provide as much public input and participation in this process as possible. Again, not that it's mandatory under CEQA that we be here, but rather that, again, we provide members of the public and yourselves a full opportunity to comment and ask questions and provide additional input prior to final certification by the City Council. I'd like to briefly describe to you some of the actions contained in the resolutions before you. In the first resolution that recommends certification of the final EIR, specific findings contained in that resolution is one, a finding that the final impact report has been prepared in accordance with law. Secondly, that the final EIR constitutes an adequate, accurate, and objective and complete environmental impact report in compliance with all applicable legal standards. Thirdly, a finding that the final EIR contains a reasonable range of alternatives and that inclusion of the Fox Theater site in Oakland is not legally required as an alternative project site. Moreover, evaluation of the Fox Theater site indicates that it is not a feasible alternative because it does not meet some of the basic objectives of the project. And I'd just like to note that this particular finding is included in this resolution because we received several comments, and in our responses to comments document, staff took a tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort to make sure that we considered those comments, and we believe that this is the adequate response to those comments. Finally, the last finding in this resolution, that recirculation of the final EIR is not required under CEQA, and this resolution sets forth the reasoning for why recirculation is not required. And again, a more detailed discussion of that is contained in both the staff report and the responses to comment document. So that is your general resolution recommending certification to the City Council. And then the second resolution contains more project-specific actions that you're being asked to recommend. CEQA requires that when you prepare an environmental impact report, that report contain mitigation measures that can reduce to a less than significant level significant impacts, or in the event that significant impacts cannot be reduced to a less than significant level, that you be able to adopt a statement of overriding considerations that basically finds that the benefits of the project outweigh the impacts that will result from the project. And finally, CEQA requires that you adopt a mitigation monitoring and reporting program that will actually demonstrate how you intend to accomplish the various mitigation measures set forth in the EIR. So those actions are set forth in the second resolution that are before you. And in closing, with respect to CEQA, again, I would just like to remind you this evening that we're really here with an intent to provide as much public input, participation, and comment and feedback from you as possible. Not that it's legally required, but again, that it's a good idea and that CEQA encourages full public participation. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll entertain them at this time.
Yeah.
In regards to our findings, on number 2 of the certification, it says that the FEIR constitutes an adequate and accurate, objective, and complete environmental impact report in compliance with all applicable legal standards. Now, can we rely on our legal team to make that determination?
We can rely on me.
The staff is recommending the adoption of this resolution, and therefore the legal team in bringing this document forward is effectively opining that the FEIR is legally adequate, but it would be a finding that you would be making by adopting the resolution.
Any other questions? Okay.
Mike, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Okay, with that, I want to provide a brief overview of the key issues involved in this project. In your staff report, we've identified them. I'll go over them very briefly. There are several issues that we want the Commission to focus on this evening, those being the PUD applications before you and the site and building design characteristics that you will be evaluating this evening, the general plan amendment and the findings that you'll need to make the findings that you will need to make in order to approve a general plan amendment if you should do so, circulation and traffic issues, cumulative development impacts, the alternative analysis, and then finally beneficial impacts of the project. We're going to go through a series of presentations now talking about environmental issues, the general plan amendment, the proposed rezone to planned unit development, and the development agreement in that order. And if there are no questions, I would turn it over to Scott Steinert, who will talk about the actually, Scott reminded me that at this point, probably the best thing to do would be to have Kaiser at Kip Edwards come forward and present his team and the Kaiser project to have the background before the staff present their staff report. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission and city staff, the cast of consultants, and a number of people that have worked hard on this over a long period of time. I'm Kip Edwards. As Gabe mentioned, I'm Director of Facilities Development for the Northern California region of Kaiser Permanente. With me tonight are a number of people from Kaiser Permanente. I'll introduce a few of them. I'd like to start with Don Oxley in the second row, who's he's here informally, but wanted to hear firsthand what's going on. Don is the Vice President and Area Manager for this customer service area, so he has responsibility for the healthcare operations of this whole area, reaching up through El Cerrito and down through Oakland. Second is Dr. Preston Mehring, who will be speaking to you tonight. Dr. Mehring is the Physician-in-Chief of the Oakland Medical Center, responsible for all the medical center staff and the medical operations. And finally, Lubor Mrazek, who is the project director for this project and is responsible for the design and construction of the project. We're very happy to be at this point. It's been a long trip to get here. As Gabe mentioned, over 19 months of very hard work with city staff, consultants, with the community. Many people within the community have participated in numerous sessions to provide their comments, to provide their input, to provide their reaction to this project and the design. And also, our staff and our hired consultants have worked very hard. And we're very pleased with the outcome at this stage of the project development. We're also very comfortable and confident that the analysis and the review has been very detailed, very thorough, complete, and accurate. And I'm referring to the documents that you have before you that have been scrutinized, reviewed, responded to in every detail possible. And that's very important for us, I think, as well as the city of Emeryville. We've said all along that Emeryville has to make a decision on weighing the benefits of this project against the impacts that this project brings. And there's no denying a project of this magnitude brings impacts. But it's also important for us to see and understand those clearly as a potential future resident of your city. Operating a medical center within a city means knowing that our members and our patients can arrive and leave easily. And so we've been equally concerned and interested in the outcomes of these studies. And for that reason, we're very pleased with the outcomes. We're also very pleased with the thoroughness that they've been presented. I'm going to speak primarily tonight as to why this site makes a great deal of sense for us for the placement of this medical center, but I wanted to address just briefly and speak to some controversy that's been developed around this project. It's come from a group that has formed themselves in opposition to the project, who may be relatively small in numbers, but they've been vocal. And what they've done is they've created an Oakland loses Kaiser myth that we're very concerned with, because that's absolutely not true. We remain an Oakland corporation. Our national headquarters remains in Oakland. Our regional headquarters remains in Oakland. We plan to continue to operate a sizable outpatient facility, our existing MacArthur Broadway location in Oakland, and maybe some others in the future. So we really feel this group that is spreading the myth that Kaiser's losing Oakland has sold Kaiser Permanente short, has sold the city of Oakland short, and is selling the city of Emeryville short. Our biggest concern about the manner in which that has occurred is that there's been a real void of information around this to the folks that have been hearing from the opposition. They've been asked, do you want Kaiser to leave Oakland? Well, they've sort of failed to describe that Kaiser isn't leaving Oakland. Several thousand people will continue to work there. They've sort of failed to describe that the need to place these facilities requires a certain size and configuration site, and they failed to describe that the alternate site that they're proposing in downtown Oakland is half the size necessary to accommodate a medical center of this size. They've attempted to cause a flood of cards and letters to come to us. Their results, though, have resulted in only a small number, many times fewer than the cards we've received in support of this project to come to us. An example I want to share with you, though, that I find interesting, one of the letters I received, I think is somewhat representative of the level of information that the opponents for the projects have shared with the community and the reaction they're getting. This is from a gentleman that lives in Berkeley who writes with concerns relative to reaching the site via public transportation. And he says he likes the downtown Oakland site better. For one reason, for people who don't work in downtown Oakland, there's a nearby BART station and excellent bus connections north, south, east, and west. Then he puts in parentheses, speaking personally, the number 72 bus would take me straight down San Pablo Avenue from my West Berkeley address to a downtown Oakland Kaiser facility. No such direct connection exists to the proposed Emeryville site. I hear the chuckles because you realize what I realize. He drove past the location of this medical center on that number 72 bus to get downtown Oakland. This one just happened to come yesterday or a couple days ago, and I couldn't help but pick it up to bring it here because I do think it represents the lack of information that's been not circulated around the controversy in this project. Let me switch back, though, to the issue at hand. Why this site is an appropriate one for placement of this medical center. We've really based this judgment it might help. Can you? We based this judgment on the site search criteria that we developed way back in early 1992 when we first realized that we'd have to pursue the replacement of our local medical center. And we stuck with that same criteria throughout the search, throughout the analysis of this site and others, and throughout the design of this site, and they continue to hold true. The first reason is it's very central to the service area, our membership service area that it supports. And that's what you see on this map. Outlined in blue is the customer service area for which Don Oxley has responsibility. And in the center of the map is a red square. That represents the location of the Emeryville site. And you can see it's almost geographically central to this service area and very close proximity to the many freeways that bisect it. The star up here is our Richmond Medical Center. The star here is our existing Oakland Medical Center. The second need that'll work okay. The second need we identified is a site of appropriate size, 30 to 35 acres. We started with that as a criteria before we looked anywhere, and we did that based on knowledge of the facilities it had to locate on the site and what it would take to do that efficiently. This site that you see outlined on the map here, here's San Pablo Avenue, Park, Hollis, 45th Street. The Phase 1 portion of this site consists of 20 acres. There's two options for future expansion, one towards the AC Transit area of another 10 acres or the alternative towards the Emeryville Business Center of 10 acres. So it meets the minimum criteria of the 30 acres. The reason that's so critical for us is for future flexibility. A medical facility, as you can imagine, evolves with the technology in healthcare, and that technology is evolving rapidly. It's very difficult to predict today how we're going to be treating patients 10 years from now. And we need a site that allows us to add those new technologies incrementally as they occur over a 50-year life of the project. This site meets that criteria. A third criteria had to do with configuration. And the configuration of this site, for the most part, is a nicely shaped rectangle with expansion zones that have good dimensions in either direction. Again, that's so we have enough dimension to place, these are good-sized facilities, into the site and still have room around them to create the flexibility for expansion and to position the facilities relative to one another so that they're functional and have the functional adjacencies necessary for efficient health care. Fourth is freeway access. Here's 80, here's 580, access directly off of 580, straight shot up San Pablo to this site, access off of 80, Powell, the new Shell Mount extension, bringing traffic right around straight to the site. It fits that criteria very well. And finally, public transportation access. I've mentioned it several times before, but again, for the record, the MacArthur BART station is approximately 3/4 of a mile in this direction, right about here, a very short distance. We run a free shuttle for our patients and for our staff from that station roughly every 7 minutes or so during working hours, a little less frequently during non-working hours. I actually rode that the other day. We test drove it over here. It took about 6 minutes during the late morning traffic to get from the MacArthur BART station to this portion of the site right here. So good access from BART, and then secondly, good access from bus transportation. This is the AC Transit map. The site's located approximately here. You can see there's several bus lines that run up and down San Pablo, including the 72 line that was mentioned earlier, and then bus lines that run in close proximity. So we think it has excellent public transportation access. The bottom line for us is from a health planning perspective for the delivery of healthcare services, this site is the best site that we have available to meet the needs of our members, and that has been our bottom line criteria all the way through, to best serve our members and best provide healthcare services to those members. Because of that, we have no alternatives that we're considering at this point in time. I'll, of course, remain available to answer questions towards the end of the presentation, but I'd like now to introduce Dr. Preston Mehring, who will speak more specifically to how this site relates to the delivery of medical services.
Thank you, Kip. Members of the Planning Commission, my name is Preston Mehring. I've been at the Kaiser Oakland Medical Center since 1971, when I started my medical residency as an obstetrician gynecologist. For the last 11 years or so, I've been in a variety of administrative capacities, and for the last 3 years, I've had the responsibility for trying to organize and manage the operations of the medical staff, the physician staff, the 100 or so residents that we teach at our hospital, and all of the employees in the outpatient setting. The personality of our medical center, or of the medical centers in the Kaiser Permanente program in Northern California, differs considerably from one center to the other. Some of the centers are small-size primary care general hospitals, and there are centers like ours that are a large tertiary care teaching hospital. We teach not only new physicians, but nursing staff come through to be taught, nursing students, other technical students in other parts of the healthcare industry, and also programs with the high school students in our community. The personality of a teaching hospital and a specialty care hospital means that the kinds of services we provide are changing all the time as the face of healthcare changes. Services like pediatric intensive care and neonatal intensive care require more and more technology and space to provide. Procedures that used to be done perhaps in an operating room, take 6 or 8 hours, keep a patient in the hospital for 10 days or 2 weeks, may now be done in a radiology suite in a treatment room in under 3 hours, with a patient having a much shortened stay in the hospital, a much better outcome, and a much faster return to useful employment. These kinds of issues have come up for us in the medical management side of the facility countless times over the 23 years I've been at this medical center. The space and the flexibility of the space that we need to provide the best care in the most cost-effective way and with the best access for the members requires that flexibility. The vision of the builders of our current medical center 25 years ago was the very best that they thought at the time. But particularly in the last 10 years, we've been increasingly constrained when trying to meet the changing needs of the healthcare in the community. Now, with our medical staff and the Richmond Medical Center staff that provides some of its hospital-based care within our current hospital, the Emeryville site's an ideal location to take care of our members and to help it to be a place where the staff from both of our medical centers can provide the hospital-based care. I understand and respect the complexities of the political issues here and of the environmental issues, and what I'm looking for is the vision to make sure that the next several decades of healthcare providers are not constrained when they change and grow with what's needed to provide the very best in healthcare for the community. Thank you, and I'll be available later also for questions.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, commissioners, Madam Chair. My name is Lubor Mrázek. I am the project director for this project for Kaiser Permanente, and I will concentrate on presenting the design aspects of the project. Kip has described the reasons why the project is best suited for this site, why is it best located in Emeryville. I would like to concentrate on the general organization of the site and demonstrate how we see we have complied with the guidelines which were imposed on us by the city and which you have approved. I will also concentrate on the statements of the input which we have received from the citizens, residents of Emeryville during our workshops, our design workshops, which we had so far 7. During the last year and a half, we've been working with a group of approximately 25 people. They were not always there, but they were very enthusiastic, and usually the same people came back. They were working with us very enthusiastically on all aspects of this project, and we hope that this will continue. We intend to continue these workshops through the future phases of the hospital when we address the interior, as well as the other buildings which are still up for the approval in the final development plan. The site is located on San Pablo Avenue on the east, on Hollis on the west, Park Avenue on the south, and 45th to the north. This corner here is not part of the 20 acres parcel. It's not part of the project, and will remain as we know it today. It's the Hollis Bay Associates building, which houses enterprises such as Noah's Bagels, Semi Freddy's, etc. The general organization of the site, starting from San Pablo Avenue, we are proposing to put a large parking structure facing the San Pablo Avenue, which will be lined by what is now become to be known as the liner buildings. The liner buildings are approximately 2-story tall buildings which will have some retail on the first floor and some office space for rent on the upper floors. Next to the parking structure and liner buildings is a zone which we have assigned to our outpatient services. These are the medical office buildings where our patients, our members, come to see the physician in the outpatient setting. In the center of these medical office buildings, we see a large open space which will be landscaped and will be open to public during the daytime hours. Next to the west is the main hospital zone where we are proposing to build the inpatient services, and that is the part of the services that will replace services in Oakland at West MacArthur and Broadway at present time. Further to the west is the second smaller parking structure, which again is lined by the liner buildings along Hollis Street on the west, and on the south at Park Avenue, again we see some liner buildings here. Those will again be retail and office space directly across from the old town hall here. The main entrances are off Park Avenue. This would be the main entrance here for the inpatient, and the second one would be primarily used by women and infant services patients. On the what we call the back side of the hospital of 45th Street, we see the emergency department entrance in this location, and the main service yard with the loading dock area here, and that service yard is connected also by this driveway to the street which leads up to 45th in this location. So we envision here possibly a one-way circulation. On this drawing, I'd like to show you how we think we have accomplished the guidelines imposed on us by the Planning Commission. And those were as follows: parcelization and block formation. The city desired to retain the block image of the area here with some north-south corridors, visual corridors, and maintaining this block-like image along Park Avenue. We have divided the site into these general 4 zones: the parking structure, the MOB, which are actually 2 zones, so you could say 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 city blocks with these visual corridors going in north-south direction across our site. This will also enable pedestrians and bicyclists to get through the site from Park to 45th Street, which was the second requirement in this block formation part of the guidelines. We were supposed to study alternative to expand on AC transit site. We have done that, and it is a site which we very much like. It's rectangular, and we are pursuing expanding on that site. Extend 47th Street to Hollis Avenue. That is part of the expansion on the business center to the north here, and it's part of the conditions of approval which are in your documents. Decrease land by stacking medical office buildings above parking. We are proposing to put parking underneath these 2 medical office buildings here, thus reducing the height of the parking structure. So there will be some parking underneath these medical office buildings. Extend Haven Street north to 53rd Street for pedestrians and cyclists. That again is on the expansion site and is part of the conditions of approval that we have read and agree with. Street life, provide ground level edge development with street related non-medical activities. This is accomplished by the way of providing these liner buildings both along San Pablo Park and Hollis and Park on the opposite end of the site. Provide above ground level edge development with street related non-medical activities. These will be located in our medical office buildings, here again facing Park Avenue. Appearance and image, mitigate height and bulk of the development. I would like to move now into the next slides to demonstrate that we have complied with this requirement. We are proposing to keep the Park Avenue image to approximately the same height as the buildings on the south of Park Avenue, which is 2 stories, by providing the liner buildings in this zone and then building what we started to call the urban frame. It's a structure which is located in place of the former Del Monte Cannery here, and it replicates some of the elements of that facade. However, it's an open frame. You can walk through it and reach the large public plaza behind it between the hospital and the urban frame. As you can see on the model, on the slide of the model here, all the buildings are set away from the curb considerable distance to diminish the height of these buildings and to preserve the character and height of these very important streets here, the Park Avenue and San Pablo Avenue. In this slide, we are looking at San Pablo to the right and Park to the left. This is what the corner of San Pablo and Park looks like right now. What we are proposing to locate on this corner is the series of the liner buildings, which would be built in modular fashion with some courtyards providing opportunity for future infills. One of these courtyards would be here, for example. The corner would remain open, and thus we would create actually two corners, which is very attractive location for example, sidewalk cafe and other businesses. And we think that this design will bring lots of activity to San Pablo, will revitalize it, and it will be a very lively area on San Pablo and Park. Further along San Pablo Avenue on this elevation, we see series of the liner buildings. They would be constructed in primarily genuine brick and some other materials to give it a variety. We understand from the conditions of approval that there is some further development desired of these facades, and we will work with the city staff on further development of these as we approach the final development plan for this phase of the project. The courtyards proposed in these locations would present opportunity for some additional retail in future should the present amount of square footage turn out not to be sufficient. So there are some additional spaces available here where we can, in modular way, fill in further liner buildings. Going in the opposite direction from San Pablo down Park Avenue, we see on this elevation liner buildings in front of our medical office buildings, and then further to the left it would be the hospital entrance at Women and Infant Services. Looking at the existing condition there, this would be Park Avenue. We would see the Pepsi-Cola bottling company, at which location we're proposing the entrance to Women and Infant Services. And here we see the urban frame, which would replace the Del Monte Cannery, incorporating some of the elements into this urban frame. For example, this doorway is proposed to be removed from the existing building and incorporated in this urban frame. Here again, we see the height of the urban frame relating to the buildings on the opposite side of Park Avenue, while the higher hospital building is pushed further away from the curb to make the volume of it a little less apparent. In the model of the same facade, we see the plaza, the public plaza in front of the hospital. Some of the functions in the hospital would be street-oriented. For example, in this location, we're proposing to locate the cafeteria, which will have the outdoor dining and will enhance the ambience here of the public plaza. Again, we understand the proposed conditions of approval where there is some further work desired on this area, and we think that we can work with the staff to improve on the design in this area. Across from Park Avenue are the two-story brick buildings to which we are trying to relate the development on our side of the street. Looking up Park Avenue, we would see the cannery, the Del Monte cannery, and this view may look in our design something like this, with the main entrance in this location and the urban frame to the right along Park Avenue. Again, the hospital building is set further back, with the height being somewhat reduced by that fact. This would be a drop-off driveway here with a covered canopy in front of the main entrance, and here we see the bridge leading to the smaller of the two parking structures. Again, on the model photo, the public plaza, looking from the opposite angle here, and the urban frame with some of the elements of Del Monte cannery incorporated in it. Again, the brick would be used on this structure to reflect or replicate the feeling of the Del Monte facade and relate it to the structures on the opposite side of this street. The building here represents the two nursing towers where the inpatient bedrooms would be located. These would be the patient's bedrooms, and these elements are bathrooms protruding from the facade on the second level of the building. Detail of the plaza and the first and ground floors of the hospital. We are proposing to express the structural system here, which is braced frame. These braces are needed for the structural system to resist the seismic forces, and they extend through all the floors to the top, to the roof deck, but they would only be expressed on these lower floors, and we feel that they fit well with the semi-industrial feeling of this part of Emeryville, although up above the building would be very elegant and would combine with these structural elements below. On the elevation, going further towards Hollis Street, we see the liner buildings in front of the smaller parking structure. Here again, the bridge leading to the hospital, connecting the parking with the second level of the hospital. And that corner of Hollis and Park presently is vacant. This vacant parcel is what we would see there now, while after the construction on the site opposite the old town hall, we would see something like this sketch indicates. It suggests the liner buildings in front of the parking structure with office space up above. This corner, the architect has treated in more civic way to relate it better to the town hall on the opposite side of the street, and to create a public plaza here, which would suggest that perhaps this could become a civic center of the town. Here again, we are looking at the main entrance to our hospital and a little bit of the urban frame, which is on Park Avenue and going to the right. On 45th Street, presently the intersection of the Watts Avenue and 45th looks like this. It's a vacant parcel again. And on this street, we would locate our emergency entrance, which in this sketch would be over here, again with a smaller, much smaller urban frame lining the street on this side. And on the right here would be the AC Transit yard with the entrance approximately in this location here. In future, on the AC Transit, the development may look something like this. Here we are again looking in northwesterly direction. Here is San Pablo Avenue and here is Park. And the development on AC Transit site would introduce 4 additional medical office buildings and additional parking structure. Also at that time, the addition to the hospital would be completed, and that is in this location here to the north and west of the first phase of the hospital. Same expansion scheme looking from the corner of Hollis and Park in the northeasterly direction. And a model of the scheme which would expand on the Emeryville Business Center site instead of AC Transit site. In this scenario, the 3 additional medical office buildings, which would be somewhat larger than the ones on AC Transit, but the total square footage would be same. Individually, they may be larger, would be complemented by, again, a parking structure in this location and a buffer zone between the Emery Bay Village development here and our proposed development in this location. The same model of the expansion on Emeryville Business Center site, looking from the corner of Hollis and Park in the northeasterly direction. I would like to use this slide to demonstrate on the parking structure which is lining or facing rather San Pablo Avenue, one aspect of the conditions of approval with which we have a minor problem. It's the addition of a 30-foot visual corridor cutting from San Pablo to the central space between the medical office buildings here. It's condition 8B in the document, and it requires that the visual corridor be introduced in this location to bring pedestrians from San Pablo to the center of the project, as well as enable the employees to reach the liner buildings along San Pablo Avenue here. We feel that 30-foot corridor at this height of the building would be rather narrow and uninviting space, which, if located in the middle of the block here between 45th and Park, would really not serve well the project or the residents, because it would bring them to the wrong place. We are proposing that the bus stops be located on the corners of San Pablo and 45th, as well as San Pablo and Park, and that the pedestrians be brought to the project alongside these streets where we are locating the liner buildings. That's where the activity would be most desirable. I will use this site plan actually for this. It may be better. If there is a corridor in this location here, we feel that the pedestrians from San Pablo would be entering through rather gloomy, narrow space through the middle of the parking structure, even though it would be a 30-foot wide space, rather than walking alongside the perimeter of the site where we have the liner buildings and where the activity is really desirable. In addition, cutting a corridor through here would somewhat diminish the opportunity to build more liners along San Pablo Avenue, where condition of approval 8A is requesting them or requiring them. So we do understand that the desire here is to build continuous liner buildings on San Pablo Avenue per condition 8A, but we feel that the corridor cutting through here would somewhat work against that desire, and it would be better to bring the pedestrians alongside the liners on Park here or alongside liners on 45th Street. Also, it would be difficult to provide good circulation through the parking structure with a corridor cutting right through the middle of it. This is seen as one parking structure, and we would have to build some bridges across on the upper floors, which you would see overhead as you walk through that visual corridor here, and those would be on all the upper levels above the first level for above grade, connecting the two parking structures. We have read the conditions of approval, and we do have some minor adjustments that we know that will be required to work on. This is one where we feel that we may have some disagreement with the staff on what was proposed. I'll be happy to answer any questions on design.
Do any commissioners have any questions of the applicant at this point, or would you like to defer it to a later date? Later.
Okay.
Yeah, you're still on.
Now that you've had the opportunity to see the presentation of the project, we'd like to switch gears a little bit and go to the environmental impact report, and Alicia Guerra will be providing some information on that. Alicia?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I'm Alicia Guerra on behalf of David Powers and Associates, the environmental consultants that were responsible for preparing the EIR. This evening, I would like to briefly describe the EIR process to date, as well as to explain what's in the response to comments document and the final EIR, and finally highlight a few of the key environmental issues and kind of walk you through the findings and mitigation monitoring program, which represents the entire package before you this evening for the environmental review process. In terms of the environmental review process, the staff report, which the Commission has and maybe some members of the public also have, there is a discussion of the EIR process on pages 11 through 13. Just briefly, this process was initiated on July 13th last year, and it started with the initial study, notice of preparation, and a public scoping meeting. That information and comments received from the public at that time were taken into consideration at the time we started the preparation of the EIR. From July 13th until about May 7th of this year, technical analyses and extensive work was conducted in order to determine the impacts of the project that Kaiser has proposed. On May 7th, the EIR circulated, and that was the draft EIR. And as many of you are aware, roughly a month later, on June 2nd, we held a Planning Commission public hearing to consider comments on the draft EIR. That was an opportunity for many of you to provide your comments, and as staff indicated at that time, we would respond to those comments in writing. From about May 7th until the end of the 45-day review period, many people requested that there be additional time to consider the EIR and to review it because it was a pretty big document. And so the staff took that into consideration and extended the review period. And at that time, it was extended to August 4th. So from May 7th until the end of that second review period, the city received over 100 comment letters. All of those comment letters were responded to, and those are included in Volume 4, the Responses to Comments document. There are several copies of that outside the chambers. The result of the effort of taking all of the 100 comment letters, as I've said, is represented in this document. And there are 6 sections in here which are intended to address the comments that were raised, as well as to identify any text revisions to the text of the draft EIR, and then to identify individuals and organizations that commented on the EIR. So I'll just walk you through that very quickly. Section 1 in the Responses to Comments document just gives you an overview of what CEQA requires for this type of document. Section 2 provides a summary of everything that's in the document. Section 3 is unique in that it contains a discussion of general categories of environmental issues that were raised during the comment period, and we call those master responses. And they're intended to sort of give you an overview where many people brought up the same issue. It's to give you a context to understand what the issue really was and to provide you with an overview in a response format. Those responses were intended to be read in conjunction with the items in Section 4. And in Section 4, we have reproduced your letters that were submitted and were submitted by other agencies, individuals, organizations, where specific responses were provided to each of the comments raised in that letter. Section 4 contains all 102 letters there. In Section 5, we provided a copy of the transcript from the June 2nd public hearing, and we also provided responses to each of the comments that were raised. And I'd just like to note that oftentimes the same comments were raised orally in the hearing and then were raised in writing. So in order to avoid lots of duplication, we just cross-referenced. I'd also like to note that you should read the responses to the specific comments in conjunction with the responses in Section 3 and the master responses to give you a full answer to your comment. Pages 19 and 20 of the staff report give you a breakdown of all of the categories of issues that were raised in terms of major topics. And examples include issues were raised in employment and housing, or what was going to happen with the existing Oakland facility, or what was going to happen with the Fox Theater site as a potential alternative. All of those are identified in the staff report, and they're found in Section 3 of the Responses to Comments document. I'd also like to note that Section 6 of the Responses to Comments document includes text revisions to the text of the draft EIR. And this section just merely notes some minor corrections, some corrections that occurred as a result of the comments that were raised, and also just some clarifications of the project design that occurred since the time the draft EIR was circulated. In addition to that, staff has a few additional text revisions which I'd like to read into the record, and we have copies of those available for anyone who's interested. Just briefly, the first text revision is to the revised summary that's contained in Section 6 of the Responses to Comments document. And in this revision, we've identified for the cumulative intersection impacts and mitigation measures, year 2010, there's some clarification provided to mitigation measure circulations 23 through 25. And the only clarification is the location of the intersection. Nothing's changed. It's just to be consistent with the text of the EIR. Secondly, mitigation for noise impact number 4 is revised also to be consistent with the text of the EIR. There is no significant change. A third text revision to the Responses to Comments document is a revision to the list of intersections that would have significant unavoidable impacts in the year 2000. A sixth intersection is just added to the list in order to reflect the text that's described and the analysis contained on pages 128 and 129 of the draft EIR. There's no new impact or new intersection that was added. A fourth text revision occurs to the Responses to Comments document in the Master Response section, and that's page 350 and 351. And that text revision just corrects a typo which was for the acreage of the Ryerson site. The correct acreage should be 16 plus or minus acres, not 76, which is just a minor correction. Sort of. Finally, one revision is noted to the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program to clarify that the implementation procedure for mitigation measure circulation 18.1 would be implemented in the future expansion phase, not in phase 1, and that was intended to be consistent with the monitoring schedule as well as the discussion in the draft EIR. So again, there are no new changes there. Just briefly, I would like to highlight some of the key environmental issues that were addressed in the EIR and that were elaborated upon in the Response to Comments document. As the staff report has summarized and as the draft EIR indicated, the project, the proposed medical center, would result in significant land use impacts, significant employment and housing impacts, significant air quality, noise, geology and seismicity impacts, hydrology and water quality issues. There's soil and groundwater contamination and cleanup issues that were addressed. Also, urban design and visual quality impacts and increased demand for utilities and services. And finally, there's also the issue of hazardous materials storage, disposal, and use. All of these impacts can be fully mitigated to an acceptable level, and feasible mitigation measures have been identified. In addition to those impacts, the project would result in some impacts that could not be mitigated to an acceptable level. And that either meant that there just wasn't mitigation to correct the situation, or the mitigation that was feasible and was available wouldn't fully mitigate the impact. As the staff report notes, those areas include transportation and circulation impacts, long-term air quality impacts for regional emissions, historic resources impacts with the loss of the Del Monte Plant Number 35 building, the loss of on-street parking as a result of some of the roadway improvement mitigation measures, and finally, short-term project and cumulative construction impacts. These impacts are described in the staff report on pages 13 to 16. In addition to those impacts, there are two other environmental issues which the Planning Commission is asked to consider tonight or to be aware of. These were also identified in the EIR and in the responses to comments document. And those are the issue regarding the selected alternatives that were evaluated in the EIR, specifically with regard to the Fox Theater site, and then also cumulative impacts. As I've indicated, both of these were addressed in the EIR. With regard to the Fox Theater site, Master Response G in the responses to comments document provides a description and a discussion of the reasons why the EIR has already evaluated a reasonable range of alternatives and why the addition of the Fox Theater site as an alternative was not considered to be feasible. With regard to cumulative impacts, there is a discussion in one of the latter parts of the draft EIR, and there is a Master Response H, which also summarizes what's in the draft EIR. When you consider the environmental impacts of this project, there are also some important beneficial effects that result from the medical center, and those were documented in a fiscal analysis that was included as an appendix to the EIR in Appendix I. Kofi will speak briefly about those as part of the discussion of the development agreement, but it's important to note that there are beneficial effects because in making findings regarding the approval of this project, the City Council and the Planning Commission, in making their recommendation to the City Council, will have to consider whether those beneficial effects will outweigh the significant environmental effects that I've just described. In terms of the findings, as stated at the beginning of this hearing, the City is going to be required to certify the final EIR and grant the project approvals, or to consider the approvals. And it must make several specific findings that CEQA requires. And just briefly, those findings are a restatement of the project impact and the mitigation measures. All of that's in the EIR. That's the basis for the findings. In addition to those findings, CEQA requires that a specific statement be made. And there are three different types of statements that can be made. One is that the mitigation measures that were identified in the EIR will take care of the impact. The impact will go away. The second finding is that the City of Emeryville can't require that mitigation because it has no jurisdiction over it. So therefore, the impact remains unmitigated. And the third finding is that there are specific economic reasons or social concerns or some other reason why the city cannot find that the mitigation is feasible or that there's another alternative that would be feasible. So each of these findings will have to be made before the EIR is certified and the project is approved. For those impacts that remain significant in spite of the mitigation that's proposed or for which there is no mitigation that's available or feasible, the City Council will be asked to adopt a statement of overriding considerations. And for the Planning Commission, that means making the recommendation to the City Council. That's why it's important to note the beneficial effects and to consider those in light of the environmental effects of this project. In addition, when the Council makes its findings and adopts those findings, it also has to adopt a mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And that's included in the staff report, I believe, in attachment 13. That's just a repackaging of the mitigation measures that were in the draft EIR and that have been summarized or cross-referenced in the response to comments document. All it does is it adds teeth to those mitigation measures so that you know for certain they'll be implemented. So when the Planning Commission makes its recommendation and the City Council adopts the mitigation monitoring program, the public can be assured that that mitigation will be implemented and the impact will be reduced to a less than significant level. So it's important to look at that if you're interested in what mitigation measures will be implemented, and that's again in attachment 13 in the staff report. This concludes the presentation of the EIR. We're available to answer any questions. We have Harry Hecht, as Gay mentioned, available to answer traffic-related issues, and Dennis Strucker and Linda Lee of Corvée Engineering also available to provide technical assistance, and then staff's available to address any of the EIR concerns. Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Are there any questions at this point? No.
I have a question, but it has to do with the previous presentation. Is this really the best way to go through everything and then ask questions? Or we can go for it now?
Well, you know, you can really do it any way you wish to. You know, my
Okay.
thought was maybe we would hear all the comments first and then maybe hear the public comments and then we make our comments
Okay.
and have our discussion
Okay.
unless you want to break it up.
No.
Okay, if that's the case, then we'll move into a discussion of the general plan amendment and amendments, and Scott Steinert will be presenting that.
Thank you. There are several amendments to the city's 1993 general plan and 1992 housing element that are being requested by the project applicant to accommodate development of the proposed medical center. The amendments being requested are discussed in detail in the staff report beginning in section 6 and have been evaluated in detail in the environmental impact report. The proposed amendments to the general plan community development policies are intended to permit demolition of the existing housing on the project site and to allow development of medical center uses. The existing land use designations of the site include commercial, mixed use, and medium density residential. The applicant is proposing to change the mixed use and medium density residential designations of the site to the commercial designation. The project applicant is also proposing to add a new section to the general plan, and this would include a healthcare section. This is being proposed to emphasize the importance of medical facilities to the Emeryville community. Other changes included in the general plan amendment would be a change to the building intensity map. The phase 1 portion of the site has floor area ratio designations of 1.3 and 0.7. Those would be changed to 1.4 with the proposed project. The project also includes changes to the circulation element of the general plan. These primarily affect the north-south vehicular circulation route that connects Doyle and Haven Streets, often referred to as the Doyle-Haven connection. The portion of that connection that is affected by the project is that portion between Park Avenue and 47th Street. As the project applicant indicated in his presentation, the portion between Park Avenue and 45th Street would have limited vehicle access via a private road, but bicycle and pedestrian access would be provided through that section of the roadway. The portion of the extension between 45th and 47th Street would be limited to bicycle and pedestrians only. Several changes to the 1992 housing element are being proposed, and these changes would be necessary because the housing element identifies the Del Monte site as a potential future housing site. The 16-acre Del Monte site is projected in the housing element as potentially including 400 housing units, 80 of which would be or could be moderate income units, 320 would be above moderate units. The significance of this proposed change is because these units are on the Del Monte site were considered in how the city intends to meet or attempt to meet ABAG's projected fair share housing requirements for Emeryville. Now, this issue is described in detail in the draft EIR, and it's also elaborated on in the response to comments document in Master Response C3, beginning on page 3-10. It's important to note that even without the 400 potential units that are identified for the Del Monte site, that Emeryville will continue to meet its fair share housing requirements for moderate and above moderate income units. I'd also like to point out that that over the past 4 years, the city has aggressively marketed the Del Monte site to residential and mixed-use developers, and the city has worked with 4 separate developers on occasions. However, none of these efforts have been successful. To offset the lost opportunity of 80 potential moderate income units on the site, the project applicant has proposed a housing program which is intended to lend funds to the City Redevelopment Agency for the development of affordable and market rate housing. At this point, I'd like to point out one minor correction to the staff report on page 26. At the top of the page, the indented portion of the text incorrectly states the proposed amendment to the housing element. I'd like to point out that it is accurately depicted in attachment 3 of the report. The blank there is to be the number 468 units. Staff has reviewed each of the proposed general plan and housing element amendments in detail and finds that the effects of the amendments, such as the loss of potential housing and the change to the city's circulation element, can be mitigated by programs either proposed by the project applicant or measures that have been identified in the environmental impact report. Back over to you.
Thanks. Any questions on the general plan amendment?
I guess not.
We're going to hold our comments
Okay.
until the end, okay?
Moving into the planned unit development, as we mentioned previously, the entire 30-acre site is proposed to be rezoned to PUD/commercial. And this designation, the intention of the PUD zoning designation is to provide for flexibility and originality for projects when they're going through the approval process, and also to establish through the PUD the type and intensity of uses. In your review of this project this evening, the Planning Commission must review the preliminary development plan and make a recommendation to the City Council that they either approve with conditions or deny the project. There are two components before you this evening: the preliminary development plan for the entire site and the final development plan, or FDP, for the hospital site. In general, the final development plan for the portions of the site that you will not be reviewing this evening in the final development plan form must be submitted within 24 months. The applicant has submitted the final development plan for the hospital in this case, which includes, as Lubor went through previously, the building and the associated landscaping. Although the final development plan for the hospital contemplates up to 520,000 square feet, at this time, the preliminary development plan approval for the entire project, if approved, would preserve Kaiser's ability to submit a final development plan to build up to 765,000 square feet of the hospital in subsequent phases. The existing zoning on the site is medium-density residential, a combination of medium-density residential, neighborhood commercial, custom manufacturing, and general commercial. And those uses in that district are contained on page 27 of your draft EIR and in the Emeryville zoning ordinance. The Phase 1 site consists of properties zoned RM, CN, CG, and IC. And the future expansion site is currently zoned mixed use, and the western portion is zoned neighborhood commercial. There's an attachment 6 to your staff report that defines all of this. The city permits the use of a planned unit development to encourage comprehensive site planning for larger projects such as the Kaiser project, which is before you. In order to approve the proposed rezone to planned unit development, the Planning Commission must make the findings that are included in attachment 9 of your staff report. As you know, the Planning Commission in August of 1993 approved certain urban design guidelines. With the assistance of Michael Piatak, we went through an exercise of what was important to us in reviewing this particular project, and those guidelines have been used, as Lubor Mrazek said, in defining their project. And we feel that they have made very good progress in meeting all of the requirements of the urban design guidelines. And as he mentioned earlier, we do take exception on a few minor issues, and those are the things that I would like to go through with you this evening. We have reviewed the proposal to ensure its compatibility with the urban design guidelines, and we've met with Kaiser many times to go over these concerns. And on the issue of the connection to San Pablo, we have come to a point where we've agreed to disagree. And we will go through our reasons for that this evening. In general, we have been very pleased with the design that you have before you and the way that it has complied with the direction that you provided to Kaiser back in August of '93. The liner buildings, as Lubor showed in his presentation, are sort of notched right now with courtyards between the buildings. It's our position, and we've met with Kaiser, and we believe that we will be able to work this issue out, that that it's impractical to consider the courtyards as expansion areas for the future phases of liner buildings on San Pablo Park and 45th, for that matter, Hollis. And that what we're trying to encourage is a continuous facade of liner buildings, particularly along San Pablo, and allow the expansion areas to be on the Park and 45th Street edges of the project. We agree with their proposal to include the courtyards at the corners. We feel that that provides a very nice edge to the project and a very active pedestrian-oriented gathering place at both corners of the project. We feel that these courtyards, if the project were to consolidate in a continuous facade the liner buildings, then the resulting courtyards would be permanently open space without the threat of ever being used, taken over by a building. And we feel that that is much more of a practical way of approaching the site planning. And I believe that we've come to agreement with Kaiser, and there is conditions of approval that allow that negotiation to continue. Excuse me. The current preliminary development plan, as Lubor says, does not include a passageway or pedestrian entrance to the Kaiser portion of Kaiser project from San Pablo Avenue. Earlier plans that we reviewed at a staff level included that component, and we feel that adding it back in would create an important point of arrival to the Kaiser project from San Pablo Avenue and a symbol of the project that would be legible and readable from San Pablo Avenue. To note for the district and for the neighborhood that Kaiser, and as a tenant or as a corporate citizen, is on San Pablo. The plan before you does not include that, and we have included a recommendation in our conditions of approval that would encourage you to require Kaiser to add in a 30-foot wide corridor to the central park area of the plan. Staff believes that an attractive pedestrian visual corridor linking San Pablo with the rest of the Kaiser project is essential to ensure that the Kaiser project is prominent to pedestrians and motorists traveling along San Pablo Avenue, and to assure the visibility of the retail and commercial uses to the patients and employees on the Kaiser site. This corridor would also provide a pleasant pedestrian connection for those people arriving by bus that now would be located on the corner and have to skirt the edges of the project in order to reach their destinations if they worked or had an appointment in the center of the site. The Kaiser project frontage along San Pablo Avenue is essentially equivalent to the length of 2 city blocks, and the proposal has no prominent pedestrian or other access into the project. This connection through the project is vital to encourage Kaiser employees and visitors to frequent the shops that will be located on San Pablo. In addition, there's a large residential neighborhood to the east of San Pablo that could benefit from access to the large open space in the interior of the site. And finally, the courtyard connection from San Pablo to the interior courtyard could be designed to include a bus and shuttle stop to have it be very much a point of arrival and a distribution area for people coming in ways other than by car. The parking garage structures are very efficiently designed for those folks that will come to the site by a car, but for the other people who will be coming by mass transit, that point of arrival seems to be missing, and that's why we're taking exception to the proposal before you. The excuse me. The central courtyard we spent a lot of time talking about when we brought this matter before you for the purposes of the urban design guidelines. And the purpose of that courtyard is to function as an open space for the employees and patients of Kaiser. A secondary purpose, however, as you all know, is to provide an attractive open space destination for the neighborhood and for the city of Emeryville. And Kaiser has intended to allow the courtyard to be used during the daylight hours and then closed in the evening for security purposes. And staff agrees with that approach. However, we do believe that there are some changes to the courtyard that could be done, and these aren't major issues in any way, but that would have the courtyard read as a more urban place rather than a suburban place. And again, I think those are the kinds of things that we can work out with the applicant on a staff level, and Condition 9 of your conditions of approval deal with that. The issue of the urban frame along along Park Street in front of the hospital is also one of those minor issues that we've worked with the applicant along with Michael Piatak. Michael Piatak's been very actively involved in this discussion to come up with a series of outdoor rooms or gathering places again to sort of create that public space that would result from the urban frame being located behind the sidewalk, but have a very gracious space between the face of the building and the urban frame that could be used for health fairs and just gathering places in general. Right now it's sort of a meandering walk, and we've had this discussion with Kaiser and believe that we can resolve that issue very favorably. There are exceptions to the city's building intensity and height requirements, and the PUD allows you to do that. The proposed plan has building heights which vary from 50 to 125 feet, while the zoning code in its existing status would allow between buildings of 40 and 50 feet. If the project is approved, the permitted building height would be set by the PUD rather than the strict and literal zoning code requirements. The issues related to the final development plan of the hospital, now this is for the hospital site only, and that's the FDP that you would be looking at, include materials and colors and the design of the hospital facade and the architectural expression. And we are still in the process of working on that, and we are recommending that these issues be resolved at a staff level in consultation with the project designers and with Michael Piatak. There are conditions of approval that are attached to your staff report related to these issues in attachment 12. We are recommending approval conditioned upon that attachment, and we are recommending approval based on the findings in the resolutions that are attached to your staff report. So in summary, the staff recommends that the Planning Commission, after holding the public hearing this evening, rezone the site to PUD/commercial, adopt the required findings, and forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council on the rezone to the PUD regarding the preliminary development plan for the entire site and the final development plan for the Phase 1A site. And if there are no questions, I would turn it over at this time to Kofi Bonner, who will talk about the development agreement and the redevelopment approvals.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, the development agreement before you has been prepared to provide certain assurances to Kaiser relating to the build-out of the first phase of their project. The agreement establishes several rules and regulations which will govern Phase 1 of the Kaiser project for 30 years. The agreement also provides numerous benefits to the City of Emeryville, the Emeryville Unified School District, and the immediately adjacent communities in Berkeley and Oakland. In the agreement, Kaiser is required to pay guaranteed annual fees to the City of Emeryville, approximating $600,000. Some of these fees are to be paid towards the provision of school care for low-income residents, approximately $40,000 a year, the enhancement of the senior center programs at $50,000 a year, a $10,000 a year scholarship fund for Emory High students that continue into college, and an additional $10,000 a year to fund school district activities or facilities. Kaiser will also provide an estimated $300,000 a year by way of sales tax and utility users tax to the city general fund. Under this agreement, Kaiser will pay to the city one-time fees approximating $2.5 million for a variety of items, including a public art, public safety, and towards a small business retention program. The agreement stipulates several community programs to address, enhance, and invigorate the Emeryville community and greater community at large. Kaiser will establish an education initiative that will provide mentoring, career exploration, and summer youth employment programs. Kaiser will work with the City of Berkeley's Biotech Academy to further that academy's goals. Kaiser is required to provide job information and recruitment opportunities to the greater community and provide grants to fund a broad range of community services, including support groups for rape survivors, child abuse treatment programs, and infant health education. It should be noted that these programs generally do not exist either in Emeryville or in the immediate adjacent community, and the Kaiser project will be providing these much-needed services, as I say, not only to the Emeryville residents and business persons, but also to the adjacent communities and residents in those communities that currently may be traveling greater distances to to access similar services. Kaiser is required to provide an unfettered investment fund of $3 million as a revolving loan fund, which may revolve 5 times to pump $15 million into the City of Emeryville's efforts for providing more housing. The funds will be offered at below market rates, at rates comparable to a very favorable AAA rated tax-exempt bond. The funds may be used to support housing programs and projects in the manner that the agency sees fit. The development agreement provides that Kaiser will not only pay its fair share of costs associated with impact on traffic, but will be required to construct several improvements throughout the city to improve the circulation system of the city. The development agreement provides for a system of reimbursement should other major development occur. In addition, Kaiser will operate a Kaiser shuttle between MacArthur Bart and the project, and fund $100,000 a year toward the free city shuttle that we hope to begin sometime in February. Again, running from between the MacArthur Bart station and through several locations within the city. So, in summary, while it is true that the Kaiser project will have impacts on the city of Emeryville and adjacent communities, there will also be several benefits. Notwithstanding the public debate that rages on this project, there are several issues that currently impact our urban environment, and traffic is just one issue. Crime, unemployment, inadequate childcare, inadequate services for the elderly, underinvestment in low-income neighborhoods, depressed commercial values, general lack of neighborhood services, insufficient funds for education and educational facilities, and last but not least, insufficient funding for the provision of affordable housing are all common problems throughout the urban area. On housing, I think it should be noted that the mere zoning designation of land or an area as a residential site does not make housing a foregone conclusion. Indeed, Emeryville, West Berkeley, and West Oakland are notable because housing is occurring in areas not designated purely for housing. There are several parcels throughout the Bay Area that, although designated as residential sites, either are vacant or contain dilapidated structures. Over the past 5 years, in my opinion, one of the principal barriers to housing has been a lack of adequate financing. This development agreement provides an opportunity to fund a variety of different types of housing in this city. And this development agreement seeks to begin to address several urban issues that confront the city of Emeryville. And staff believes that the project is an essential component for the continued revitalization of our community. Another action that will be before the agency on November 21st is the approval of the participation agreement, which will be for the second phase, actually for the 2 phases of the Kaiser project. The participation agreement provides for direct agency assistance in assembling property for both phases of the project and details specific guidelines that will commit the agents and commits the agency and Kaiser to continue to work for the purchase of the AC Transit site. We believe that the project and the impacts and the benefits, once looked at very closely, will be seen by you, hopefully, to be of great benefit to this city. And so with that, my presentation is concluded, and I stand ready to answer any questions.
Madam Chair, that basically concludes our staff presentation. We sincerely appreciate your patience. But before we open the public hearing, I would like to note for the record that we have received a number of written comments that I want to pass the ones that we have multiple copies around to you at this time. But to note for the record that we received a letter from the City of Oakland dated November 3rd, the Legal Aid Society of Alameda County dated November 3rd, a letter from Grace A. Chauvin dated October 28th, 1994, a letter from Steve Scard dated October 30th, 1994, and a letter from Rita Bloomingdale dated, I believe it's today, November 3rd, 1994. And I will pass these around for your information this evening. That concludes our staff report.
Okay, well, in the interest of timing, and since we seem to be losing some of our audience participation, if it's okay with the commissioners, what I'd like to do is have us make our comments afterwards, and maybe now open the public hearing to hear the comments from the audience. And then as we think about things we want to discuss, write them down, and then we will do our comments afterwards. Is that okay with everybody?
I have a comment. Can we take our break now?
Yeah, I was going to do that too. First of all, I think there are probably some with speaker cards if somebody would give those to me, and I think this is the time for us to take a 10-minute break, and then we will open the public hearing, so please don't leave because we want to hear what you have to say, okay?
That is crummy.
Okay. The public hearing is now open. I'm going to read the speaker cards 5 at a time, and would you please line up over there to get started. Paula Turcotte, Linda Jones, Ann Coleman, Connie Williams, and Nellie Hannon. Oh, he's here? Good. Pardon? Okay. Paula? Okay. Linda, you want to go ahead?
My name is Linda Jones, and I'm an Emeryville resident. I live on Adeline and 43rd Street. And I just wanted to make sure I came tonight and let the commission know that I am more than in favor of Kaiser, and I can't wait to see it get started. And I think Oakland's problem is it's just sour grapes. Once again, they lost another project by dragging their feet.
Thank you. Paula?
Hello, I'm Paula Turcotte. I'm a resident of Emeryville as well as a business owner, and I'm here speaking positively for the Kaiser project. I have been very honored to have been part of the design workshop, and I know we're not seeing the thing as it evolved, but it's been a very exciting and an exciting design process that has allowed the import. It hasn't been just a yeah, and let us go away. It's wonderful, it's great, and the one negative thing that keeps coming up to me is with the people who keep saying, you know, not to have it in here, if it's such a disgusting thing, why does everybody else want to take it away from us and have it in their home court? So let us have it, let us suffer with it, we want it. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Anna Coleman, a resident of Emeryville, and I am just real surprised that the city of Oakland would turn down something like Kaiser. And I am so delighted that we are getting Kaiser because I think it will improve San Pablo Avenue. I think really we're very fortunate. And I'm all for Kaiser. Thank you.
My name is Connie Williams, and I volunteer at our Emeryville Senior Center 5 days a week, and I'm also the president of our advisory council there at Emeryville. I'm here tonight in full support of the Kaiser. I think it would be one of the greatest assets to our city that we've ever had. I'm a resident of Emeryville for 42 years, and I live right next door to the Del Monte site for 39 years. And I was hoping to see, before I die, something beneficial in that spot. It had stayed vacant a long, long, long time. And I want to say to the people of Oakland, I don't know who you are, you had your chance, and so much to be done in Oakland. Let Emeryville go on and try to get with us.
Thank you, Connie.
Good evening. My name is Nellie Hannon, Director of the Emeryville Community Action Program. We're located at 4331 San Pablo Avenue in the old firehouse. Even though we are in the relocation area, we're more than happy to see Kaiser come into Emeryville and have my full support. Thank you.
The next 5 speakers, Jack Bida, Deborah McCarthy Chrysantis, Martha Lesser, Abraham Caffey, and Douglas Peden.
Good evening. I'm Jack Bida. I'm a resident and businessman here in the Emeryville area, and I wanted to express my strong support for the Kaiser development in the community. I think Kaiser has done a wonderful job in working with the staff and with the city to come to a plan that's going to be acceptable to us. The factors in the environmental impact report seem to be mitigated. Some of them are not, but the overriding benefit to the community certainly overtakes the impacts that are negative and cannot be mitigated. So I encourage the Planning Commission to approve this development and recommend it to the City Council. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I am Deborah McCarthy Krasanitz. I'm a small business owner in Emeryville and currently the president of Emeryville Industries Association. And I think I can speak on behalf of our board and the association, and we are in full approval of this project. We support it, and we encourage you to support it. I also want to thank you on behalf of VIA for all your work on in all the projects that you've been involved with. You've moved Emeryville forward in the past 6 years that I've been here, and I commend you for your hard work. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioner. My name is Abraham Caffey. I'm a resident of Emeryville for the past 30 years, and I'd like to express my support for Kaiser. Thank you.
My name is Martha Lesser, and originally I was not sure that I was in favor of Kaiser, partly because I've been an artist and an art educator for about 30 years, and I worried about the look of the building. I'm still a bit concerned. I've been participating in the design workshops, and there's sort of a nasty rumor circulating that in spite of some of the things that are in the process of being developed, that Mr. Piachok will have a final say, and that he's in favor of a much harder-edged look than I would say about half of us in the design workshop. And I'd like some comments from the planning director and perhaps from Lubar on this. When I heard this rumor, I did call a member of council who said to me, no, that Piachok was simply one of a number of consultants, and that the design group was also a consultant. I think it's very important that under the heading of impact, that the aesthetics be, looked at. That's the only part that I have expertise in, and I'll push for that. And I'd also like to thank the Planning Commission. I've only moved here 2.5 years ago from Hong Kong, which is a real go-go city, and it's nice to find I moved to another one. Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Doug Peden, and I reside at 4 Captain 209. I own that unit. And anyway, I've lived in Emeryville on and off for about 15 years. And I feel that the Kaiser site would be very desirable because really, I don't think, at first I thought it was an Emeryville, Oakland issue, but when I really thought of it, it's really a greater community issue. Where would the best place to put a hospital be? How could you get a first-class hospital out of this? And the best place would be Emeryville, because I've talked to different health workers and they said, we don't want to work in overcrowded conditions, and we refuse to go to hospitals in areas where we have to be overcrowded. And this is double the space, and I think we would get a lot more people applying for different positions, and therefore a lot better hospital out of it. And not only would we have a better plant, but we'd have better people being attracted to that. And I think the location there is is much easier to get to than the Oakland site. It's much more centrally located to Berkeley, and different freeways and different systems, and I support it completely, and I hope it comes through. Thank you very much.
The next 5 speakers are Joan Bossard, Alexis Soul, Donna Pierce, Jerry Brown, and Thordy Ashley. His card's here.
Yeah, apparently he's not here yet, and he'd like to,
He just got here.
Oh, excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name's Joan Bossert, and I'm a resident of Emeryville. And to begin with, I also have participated in the design workshops. It's been a fascinating experience, and I'm delighted with how the plans are coming along. However, I do have some questions about some of the information I read in that monstrous page document I picked up the other day in the planning department. The first is has to do with revenues. On section 4, page 82, the cost revenue analysis shows the net revenue to the city of Emeryville will be $803,000 a year. Will the city be receiving these annual revenues from Kaiser in perpetuity or for a limited time only? Then on housing, on replacement housing, I need some clarification because there seem to be some conflicts in there. On page S8 and S9 in section EH 5.2, requirements of redevelopment law would be carried out by the City of Emeryville Redevelopment Agency. Funding would be provided by the project applicant. To me, that says that Kaiser will be paying for the redevelopment housing. And later on in the next page it says the Kaiser housing program should fund the construction of affordable housing units. Again, that says to me Kaiser will be paying for it. And yet Kaiser, in section 4, page 570, I think it's Mr. Marachek, he says Kaiser has not agreed to fund the agency's replacement housing obligations and requests that this requirement be deleted from mitigation measure. Later on, he says Kaiser has indicated a willingness to consider the 25 sites, but has requested that it not be required to do so. Please delete the word should and insert the word could. I'm a little concerned about that. Traffic mitigation. The Doyle Haven Street is really confusing to me. It's sort of now you see it, now you don't. The Doyle Street, on section 3, page 45, the Doyle Street extension is identified in the City of Emeryville's general plan as a future north-south collector roadway going from Park Avenue, up Haven, to Doyle Street, Stanford Avenue. Then, in response to my letter, it says figure 2 of the City of Emeryville's general plan shows Haven Street as a potential future bike path pedestrian corridor. I don't know what you're planning on doing there, but I'm kind of concerned about it. And then finally, I kind of smiled when I read in section 6.6 that, to quote, without the proposed amendments to the Emeryville general plan, the redevelopment plan, etc., the project would conflict with certain policies, goals, and requirements contained therein. However, because the project includes such amendments, it would not result in a conflict with the Emeryville general plan, and therefore would not result in a significant land use impact. Well, this is a wonderful circular argument. You define any conflict and resulting significant land use impact out of existence. I mean, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, and I think Kaiser is going to have a huge impact. It may be very beneficial, but I think you should not say that you will not have a significant land use impact. Having said all of that, I think it looks as if Kaiser is going to come in here, and I think it has the potential for being a very exciting addition to the city. Thank you.
Alexis?
Hi, my name is Alexis Soul, and I currently live in Oakland, about as far away from Kaiser as I will live when I get around to building on the vacant lot I have in Emeryville, if Kaiser moves here and I move here at the same time. So I'm a neighbor of Kaiser now, and I may continue to be a neighbor of Kaiser's. I'm disappointed that more consideration wasn't given to the downtown Oakland site as I think on a regional basis there's many arguments for that. In regarding what I've heard tonight from the presentation, there's many positive things that Kaiser has offered to the community of Emeryville. I'm particularly concerned about traffic mitigation and the fact that there is that Kaiser is saying they will have shuttles to BART and also contribute to the Emeryville public shuttle. That's wonderful, but I don't recall seeing anything about the light rail, which I've seen proposed to be going down San Pablo Avenue. And if that is still being considered, it seems that that should be a part of any traffic mitigation plans. I also have here a letter from Robin Freeman, Environmental Design, who is a very near neighbor he lives on Powell Street, just over the Oakland border. And I don't think I'll read the whole thing, but if I can submit this to someone, I'll do that. And one of his main concerns, which is also one of mine, is the facade, what the buildings look like, and whether the human scale is maintained. And it seems like there's been some effort to do that, but I think there can be a lot more. He also speaks about energy-saving measures such as daylighting and operable windows, increasing productivity and patient well-being. And also that the finding was that impacts to Oakland neighborhoods in the immediate area of the project are not within the scope of the Kaiser Emeryville proposal. The 21,000 plus trips generated are going to be affecting everybody. They're not just going to appear out of nowhere and at the Kaiser site. They will be passing through other neighborhoods. So, thank you.
Donna Pierce. You can't tell?
I'm Donna Pierce. I'm a resident of Oakland and a member of the SPGEA Steering Committee. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak and for your responses to the questions that we submitted. We've had mixed feelings about Kaiser. There's undoubtedly positive as well as negative benefits to our portion of Oakland. For me, the time between the release of the EIR and this meeting was insufficient for me to really study it, the responses closely. And I must say that a quick reading left me with the impression that the responses could be summed up as no problem exists, nothing can be done about it, and it's not our concern. That may be unfair, and not the intent, but that was the first impression. There are several things I feel need further study, but because of the lack of time, I'm going to focus on the traffic mitigations, especially the ones that require a memorandum of understanding from the City of Oakland in order for Emeryville to assess Kaiser for its fair share contribution. For those who haven't read the EIR, there are 7 intersections in Oakland that will be heavily impacted by increased traffic. There are recommendations in the EIR for those mitigations, but they cannot be made by Emeryville. They have to be made by Oakland. What I wonder about is who takes the lead, Oakland or Emeryville? Who decides what should be done, the recommendations in the EIR or some plan that Oakland might come up with? When and how does all this happen? Who decides what Kaiser's fair share is? Are there deadlines for these things? And what do local residents need to do to make sure that these mitigations actually take place? That pretty much sums up all that I've had an opportunity to really study and feel that I can comment on at this time. And I want to thank you again for the opportunity and for your responses, because I realize from the description of what's required by an EIR, you don't really have to do this. So thank you very much for doing it. We do appreciate that.
Donna. Jerry Brown.
Thank you. Jerry Brown for We the People. I have the comment that you inserted inside this monster tome with just 9 or 10 days to read it. I think I don't know what your big rush to judgment is. I think it's highly irresponsible. Secondly, I don't believe that you're going to have 3% people commuting by bike or walking to this Kaiser facility. I think that is absolutely a falsehood with no credible foundation. And then that leaves a 2% transit factor, which I think in this day and age is a disgrace. I mean, you already have a tremendous attraction to automobile trips already. Emeryville is like a magnet for more and more automobile rides. Kaiser is going to add to that, and then all the other projects that are coming along to jam up San Pablo, jam up Powell Street, jam up I-80. And I think this whole thing is highly irresponsible. And we're getting a lot of fast and loose talk from Kaiser. They originally said it was going to be 2 or 3 stories. Now I see in their PR presentation it's going to be 5 stories for the hospital. They can put up a 5 to 6 story hospital in downtown Oakland and accomplish the same goal. All of that constitutes 20 acres. Sometime in the distant future, assuming Kaiser doesn't lose considerable membership over this scandalous treatment of the city of Oakland that gave it birth, they will not need any more than the 20 acres, of which Oakland has 20. They have it there. And I think this is a very inadequate document, and I don't think they're taking seriously the comments. They feel they've got this group wired, and they're moving ahead. I'm just here to tell you that we're going to fight it every step of the way because we don't think, as a matter of law, it's right, or as a matter of policy, that it represents sound judgment on the part of the city. Thank you.
Comments?
Good evening, I'm Dorothy Ashley. Former resident of Emeryville, a resident of Oakland now. And we just heard from the ex-governor, I'm glad I voted for Pete Wilson. By mail. I'm a Kaiser member. I'm also Republican, sir. I've been a member of the Kaiser Permanente plan since 1942 when I was 19 years old. And Henry J. Kaiser is one of a legacy, an industry that this man formed part of my life that I exist now. The financial part that I have in my education is due to Henry J. Kaiser. When I was 19, I started working in the shipyard. When the shipyard folded, when the war was over, Kaiser offered all of the employees a chance to come into Oakland. I worked from a welder, a nurse's aide, to a graduate RN now. I still hold that current license. The 2 industrial giants, Joseph Stickney Emery and Kaiser, meet in death. But I hope that you will go forward and that you will bring the Kaiser Hospital into Emeryville. It belongs in Emeryville. Oakland has been depressed 49 years, and they had the chance. Kaiser International is in Oakland. And without Kaiser International, Oakland would go down. Everything else has gone down over there. San Pablo has been depressed 49 years. There are no businesses down there. It's a high crime area. There's nothing down there now that Kaiser, when Kaiser comes in, you're going to have housing. You're going to have jobs. Long, long, long before Jerry Brown and these other people screaming about it, long before affirmative action in 1964 was voted in, Henry J. Kaiser had affirmative action. He hired all races. Long before Jesse Jackson thought about the Rainbow Coalition, Kaiser had a Rainbow Coalition. Coming into Emeryville, there will be jobs for all people, not just the Browns and a few people that are running around here screaming who wanted to run for president who will never make it. Who will never, never make it. Bring Kaiser into Emeryville. Another thing before I leave, Kaiser informed their members. They sent out a booklet, a building plan update. Kaiser has not one violation with environmental in any building that they have ever done. They don't dump waste. They have waste management. So why are these people screaming and hollering? Why? You want to take it down to let Jerry Brown develop it around some historical building, but he can't develop?
developing in Emeryville and go forward, please.
The next 5 speakers are Tova Marks, David Ladder, Shirley Reeves, Brian Connery, and Joan Catherine Brown.
I am Tova Marks, a member of B, which stands for Busy, Exciting Emeryville. I've lived in Emeryville for 7 years, and I make some of the following remarks in retaliation for some of the outrageously unwarranted and scurrilous attacks from the people who call themselves back and their supporters. Before I begin, though, I wonder rhetorically if they thought they could say the things they do with impunity. The first time I saw Mr. Brown and his entourage barging into these hallowed halls, I asked myself, what in the name of heaven is that bunch doing here? Almost at once I had the answer. A veritable vineyard of sour grapes had descended upon us, and it amazed me that no one had seen fit to bounce them right out on their rumps. But we are a democratic society and cannot bar even a desperate politician from speaking. Mr. Brown, who has a history of not getting it right, conveys an hysterical compulsion to pick on those who are getting it right. Let me get into some positive, objective information lifted from the EIR. The Environmental Impacts Report, which has been prepared by the City of Emeryville as the lead agency in conformance with the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, is an objective study of impacts and mitigations to the Kaiser proposal. In each category, be it housing, transportation, traffic, or jobs, wherever impacts could be anticipated, Kaiser and the city plan to offset them by developing housing, relocating homeowners and businesses, widening roads, creating transportation, and whatever else is necessary to mitigate impacts. Last June, Mr. Brown came to Emeryville begging for Kaiser to build its new medical facility in Oakland. He pointed out the decadence of our neighboring city, its crack houses and decaying buildings. He characterized Oakland as a city in dire need, a city that needs the Kaiser project much more than Emeryville. He implied that Emeryville was taking the bread out of the mouth of poor Oakland. Never once did he mention the fact that Oakland had its chance to find an acceptable site for Kaiser, that Laney College in Oakland turned Kaiser down, and the 2 other alternative sites were unacceptable. That is, those sites did not meet Kaiser's objectives then, and they do not meet them now. As stated on page 4 of the draft EIR, one of Kaiser's basic objectives is to provide appropriate flexibility for future expansion, to accommodate future membership growth and changes in medical practice and technology. This objective reflects the fact that because of the changing national healthcare situation, Kaiser cannot at this point determine the extent of its need for future facilities and needs a project site with enough acreage to allow it to build a medical facility in phases. None of the alternative sites, according to information from EIR consultants and Kaiser, meets any of the basic objectives of the project. The EIR at Master Response G1 says, a concise analysis of the Fox Theater site indicates that it would not reduce the 5 significant unavoidable impacts and would in fact result in new significant impacts. I urge the commission that is examining this in-depth report to accept it and allow Kaiser and Emeryville to get on with this spectacular project. I believe it will be a boon to Emeryville and the entire region. As for Sue Hester, who has stormed in here gushing her artificial trumped-up complaints, isn't there some ugly thing in the world around which she can legitimately wrap her tentacles? Question: what possible benefit can be derived from citing infractions that don't exist? Answer: to distract our city staff from their exhaustive research in order to pursue paper for her, a delaying tactic, which is her stock in trade, a technique analogous to an ice skater having her competition's knees whacked. Ms. Fester, I just have a sentence more. Can I go on?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a long 3 minutes.
5 minutes.
I get a right of personal privilege to respond to this journalist attack?
Dave Ladder. Dave Ladder, please. David Ladder.
So you can just attack with impunity.
You did it before. She got back.
I didn't attack any person.
Order, please. Order, please.
Personal attack.
Let's continue on with the public hearing. Mr. Ladder.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I'm Dave Ladder. I've operated a business, or my family has, for 75 years on Hollis Street in Emeryville. For the past 18 months, I've attended meetings, I've studied the project, and my initial reaction was not favorable. I thought it was too much for the area. Therefore, I spent the time and effort to learn more about it. I've talked to the Kaiser people, I've talked to other people in business, and I want to encourage you to keep the project moving. I believe it's good for Emeryville, it's good for the community. I was born and raised in Oakland, and so I certainly am not saying take Emeryville over Oakland. I believe it's good for our area, and before I stop, just simply want to say I appreciate the work that this commission does. The staff is to be commended, and most of all, you've opened it up for all of us to contribute and learn more about the project if we have interest. And I think that's really what the whole process is about. I support the project. Thank you.
Shirley Reeves.
Thank you all for hearing us. I'm Shirley Reeves, and I have been a resident of Emeryville since 1973 and a local active real estate agent selling property in the city of Emeryville exclusively since 1980. I fully support Kaiser in Emeryville as a positive plan development as presented to you and to the city. I do want to comment here that I have had conversations with other real estate agents that I work with and in the community, and they too have expressed that this is a positive approach for Emeryville, for the community, regionally and locally. Thank you.
Brian Connery.
Good evening. My name is Brian Connery. I've been a resident of Emeryville for over 6 years, and I'm also a member of the Bay Area Coalition on Kaiser. And I wanted to comment tonight on, I would like some clarification on my comments to the draft EIR. The focus of my letter was about the seismic concerns of the site and the area, and I'm not any kind of an expert. I just asked some normal questions, and according to page 216 of the draft EIR, I quote, "The proposed medical center as an emergency facility would not remain functional after an earthquake, period." Well, in the comments to my comments, section 4, number 497, it says, "The proposed medical center would be designed and constructed to remain in full operational condition following the maximum credible earthquake." So I would like some clarification on that apparent contradiction. Thank you.
Joan Catherine Brown.
Hello, my name is Joan Braun. I live at 5514 Doyle Street. I'm a homeowner there. And I must say that I didn't get to pick up this major work here until yesterday afternoon. I took time off from work to come and get it, so I haven't had time to really read the whole thing, as you might guess. I'd like to confine my questions to sort of the microcosm, because that's what I know best. And the microcosm for me is the Doyle Street, Haven Street extension. I would like some clarification on the fact that I found the
differing explanations of what was going to happen with the Doyle Street Haven extension very confusing. I found one map, attachment 5 to the staff report, which indicates that extension goes straight down Doyle Street from 55th to Powell, which happens to be the block I live on, and I found another one, figure 22. Well, actually, it's flipped. Figure 22 is the one that shows it going straight down. Attachment 5 is the one that shows it running along what is now a semi-active railroad siding behind. I'd really like to know which way it's going to go. And I'm really kind of confused that just to find that it's like even in this issue, this newest issue that we've gotten, still it's this unclear. I mean, this was a big thing that we talked about at our last meeting. Still, it's unclear as to where this road goes, when it's going to go in, what's going to be on it. That doesn't seem quite fair. Why is this particularly important to me, this extension? Because I live on Doyle Street, so it matters a lot. Some of the things that I thought about as I thought about this, the reality of this extension, was that how many cars would be on this road? It's supposed to be a major project access from the north. What does that mean? Well, the master response E1 says that means that in the peak PM hours there will be 110 to 340 vehicles per hour on the segment between Powell Street and 47th Street, which means it's coming up past my house. And so I thought, well, what do we have now? Well, how many cars go by now? We counted them. Peak hour, 69. That's over a 400% increase. So I thought, well, okay, so maybe the street gets widened. Is that what happened? Well, they call for, in cross-section, a street of 43 feet. I went out and measured the street. It's just about that now. The sort of supposedly good news in all of this is that it will contain 18 feet of pedestrian and bicycle lanes. It already has almost that in sidewalk. So what's the gain? The gain is a lot of cars, and apparently parking disappears on that street because it's going to have 2 traffic lanes and no increase in size. But no mention is made of that. You sort of come into that by inference. Interesting. The other thing that I wanted to address is the fact that different maps, different places in this document, it says that 55th Street will extend. Extend to where? To the Doyle Street extension? To Hollis Street? It's going to extend. There's going to be a stop sign. Could we see exactly what's going to be happening? I'd like to know, if this is the peak hour projection, what are the projections for the rest of the day? How long are these garages that this is the main access to going to be in action? It's not going to be a standard ambulance route. Is it an alternate? What does that mean? How many ambulances? Right now, what I know is when a car with a major car stereo goes past, my windows shake. What happens when an ambulance goes by? There's going to be 500 cars. I believe I read 500 cars an hour in peak periods on Hollis, and only 340 maximum are going to move over to Doyle. Is that true? And I'm not sure it would be. If you were on a crowded gridlock street, wouldn't you try and move over another block? I'd sort of like to know where those numbers came from and why these cars won't be moving. And I guess ultimately, the reason it's of major concern to me is that my neighbors and I, we own homes in Emeryville, we pay property taxes, we teach in the Classroom Partners program, we vote in the local, state, and federal elections, we garden in the community garden. We live in Emeryville. We thought our partnership with Emeryville was to help to make it a better place. And even when I read the responses to my last comments and to my written responses, I still feel the same way. Apparently my neighborhood is one of the municipal sacrifice areas, and we were never told. I'd like to know why, when, how. That's, I guess, why I'm concerned. And I'm concerned because it means Emery Bay Village, Doyle Street Condominium Association, the Pacific Rim Montessori School just came in last year. They'll be heavily impacted by this. Doyle Street continuing on the other side of Powell Street as it does, it'll be logical for cars to continue that way to avoid the gridlock on Hollis Street. So there's the Emeryville Organic Garden, there's the Waldorf School, also impacted, and no mention is made of this. I don't know, kids, children, retired people, they seem important to me. That's all I have to say.
The next 5 speakers, Jane Hoop, Carolyn Hahn, Sue Backman, Jim Golden, and Carol Handelman. Hoop, yeah.
My name is Jane Hoop. I've lived at Watergate in Emeryville for 22 years, and although I don't represent Watergate, I feel that I am representative of Watergate in my support of the Kaiser project. And the only comment I wanted to make tonight was that I would hope that Oakland and Berkeley could see the Kaiser project as an opportunity to improve St. Pablo Avenue and pave the way for them for that to expand into their parts of St. Pablo. It's been a blight in the East Bay for as long as I've been here, and it's a real opportunity to clean that part up. Thank you.
Sue Beckman.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I would like to make a statement regarding the Kaiser project on behalf of the Emeryville Chamber of Commerce at the request of our Board of Directors. My name is Sue Backman, and I'm the current president of the Chamber of Commerce. As an active member of the Emeryville community and a business owner and operator here in Emeryville for the last 4.5 years, I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of the people who work and live in our community on a regular basis. The overwhelming majority of these people tell me they are in favor of Kaiser coming to Emeryville and see it as a very positive addition to the city. The critics of this development point to two issues repeatedly, neither of which hold up on close examination. The first is traffic. Well, I've got news for you folks. Traffic is already a problem in Emeryville, and most of it is passing through on the way to somewhere else. Whether Kaiser comes to Emeryville or not, we'll still have the traffic problem. What Kaiser will provide is the financial resources to mitigate this problem. All the talk about public transportation is just so much idealistic rhetoric. Sick people do not take public transportation if they can help it. Perhaps more to the point is that the ratio of folks driving versus public transit is the same regardless of where Kaiser might locate. The other issue dragged out repeatedly is housing. What seems to be overlooked here is that Emeryville has one of the best records anywhere on improving housing stock, including low-income housing. We already meet or exceed standards set by ABAG. Look at our record. We've increased housing hugely in the past 12 years. The city should serve as a model for live-work development and reclaiming abandoned factories and warehouses and encouraging their development into studio habitats. Not to mention the fact that large tracts of land in Emeryville have sat idle for years and not one housing developer has made an offer. The market is just not there right now, and it may not be for another 10 years or possibly not in the foreseeable future. What I would like to know is whose interest does this group of out-of-town meddlers who call themselves back think they represent? The individuals I read spouting off to the press include an Oakland political flack, and a realist political hack, and a legal mercenary, all of whom have access to grind and who are working not for Emeryville's benefit, but they think for Oakland's. The smell of sour grapes hangs pretty heavily in the air when they open their mouths. I would also like to know who funds this group, who pays their bills. Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest you put some of that time, energy, and money to work creating something positive in Oakland instead of being a pain in Emeryville. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Jim Golden. I'm going to have to speak to you twice here quickly. First is as President of the Board of Directors of the Emeryville Village Homeowners Association. As each and every one of you know, and as staff knows, and all members of Kaiser know, we adamantly oppose the Doyle Street, Haven Street extension. Having said that, I will now revert to Jim Golden, private citizen, if that's okay. Nobody wants to talk about the $17 million that the city of Emeryville is in the process of spending for the new 40th Street flyover, the new Shell Mound, the new Bay Street, which is going to have a tremendous impact on lessening traffic. Nobody wants to talk about, by the time Kaiser's built, Caltrans will have finished the Interstate 880 connector that will take a minimum of 50% of the through traffic off of the streets of Emeryville. Nobody wants to talk about the housing that we've added in the last 12 years. 200 and some odd units at Emeryville Club and Apartments 2, 45 senior housing, the infill, Emeryville Village, Emery Glen. I could go on for hours about the housing that we've added. Kaiser can only add to our housing stock. Mr. Brown said that our behavior is scandalous. Is that what he said? I'm aghast that somebody with his mentality would accuse us of being scandalous. Obviously, he has some other axe to grind, probably trying to build up listeners for his fledgling radio station or something off the wall, who knows. But he certainly does not have the interests of Emeryville at heart. I think Sue and a couple of other speakers have already laid out the other hacks that are coming into town. I think you'll hear tonight an overwhelming support for Kaiser from the residents of Emeryville, and I think you should take that into consideration. We do have some reasonable dissent from the Emeryville residents, but I think you'll find that somewhere in the area of 65 to 70% of the citizens of Emeryville support Kaiser, and I'll ask you to do the same thing. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Carol Handelman, and I am an Emeryville resident, and I am a member of BAC. As staff has pointed out repeatedly this evening, the Kaiser proposal is an extremely complex proposal, impacting almost every aspect of life in our community. I commented on the draft EIR last spring. Mostly my concern then, and as it remains, is the amount of change needed in the general plan to accommodate this project, especially the housing element. The vast changes amount to essentially a scrapping of the general plan rather than developing a project which conforms with it. And I feel, as some other speakers have said, that the responses to comments dismissed any comment as irrelevant. I am further concerned with the kind of notice we were given about this meeting and about the availability of the responses to comments and the staff reports. I received a certified mail notice in my mailbox on Monday, the 24th of October. I had no idea what it was for. Actually, I'd received a notice from the post office on Saturday. I was expecting a package, and I assumed this was a second notice. On Tuesday morning, I went to the post office only to be told, oh, it's a letter, and it was my notification of this meeting and of the availability of the responses to comments. I work full-time in San Francisco. I had to take an hour off work to come here during business hours to get it. I had to take another hour off work today to get the staff report, because it's not practical to say go to the copy shop and make your own of a 900-page report. It's also not practical to think that an informed public can have less than a week to look at all these documents, put them together, and comment on them. At a back meeting on October 3rd, Kip Edwards of Kaiser spoke to us in a very friendly manner, in a manner saying he wished to work with us, and saying that he couldn't see how any informed comment could be made with less than 3 to 4 weeks availability of these documents. We've had less than a week on some of them in practical matters. Also, Madam Chairman, at last week's Planning Commission hearing, I spoke before you and I asked that speaker cards be numbered so that the people who came here early could speak first and leave if they had to. The group seemed to appreciate that. You asked staff to take care of that, and here we are this week, and it hasn't happened.
Okay, the next group of speakers is Jack Arnold, Andy Getz, Will Richards, Ken Scheidig, and Jonathan Marks.
Good evening. My name is Jack Arnold. I'm a resident of Emeryville.
A little closer. Put the mic a little closer to you, please, Jack.
And I'm astounded as a professional, as an architect and planner, that people are finding that much wrong with this project. I think it's a very well-conceived and well-designed project. I've been a member of the design workshop and have gone to at least 5 meetings, but I've read the minutes of all of them. And I don't know whether Mr. Brown is still with us, but I can assure him that we're not wired. That group has worked in a very critical and discursive manner with Kaiser, and I think that our input has been accepted by them to the extent that it was proper. I can't really think of any real reason that somebody would criticize this project and try to shoot it down with so many good things about it. The only valid reason I could think of is that they might be going to tear your house down to make way for the hospital. And of course, that kind of situation, I understand the bitterness of the owner of the house, but that's one person, and we're a community. And speaking of the community, it seems to me that this argument or this examination of the project is proper between the community and Kaiser, and the outsiders hardly qualify, barely qualify. So I urge you to vote for it. Thank you.
Mr. Getz?
Good evening, Madam Chair, all the rest. I have a few handouts here. And then I have another one here.
Just more than that.
And lastly, some proposed changes to the conditions of approval. Get out of the room. I have no oral comments at this time regarding the environmental impact report, but I'd like to say a few things about some of the other subjects for consideration this evening. The underlying focus of what I have to say regards the traffic in the neighborhood. And if you imagine the neighborhood as bounded by the tracks on the west, by San Pablo Avenue on the east, by Powell Street on the north, that neighborhood now has about 30,000 cars a day going through it. This counts cars not on Powell and not on San Pablo, but cars that drive through it with no stop in the neighborhood, cars that have a trip that ends there, and cars that have a trip that begins there. About 30,000 cars a day. The East Bay Bridge project is estimated to add another 30,000 cars a day. That'll bring us up to about 60,000 cars a day. Kaiser will add another 20,000 cars a day. We're up to 80,000 cars a day. Chiron, by the year 2000, will add 15,000 cars a day. And all other development, I'm wild guessing here, all other development and all other increases in drive-through traffic at about 5,000 cars a day for this neighborhood. That's 100,000 cars a day in a neighborhood which now has traffic problems with 30,000 cars a day. So with that as the sort of underlying understanding of the big picture of what's going on here, I'd like to propose that the deletion of the Haven-Doyle Street connection as a north-south artery to relieve traffic from Hollis Street. Hollis Street, a street which now has the intersection of Powell operating at a level of service F. And the proposal by Kaiser for its only significant roadway improvement to be the connection of Horton to Landrigan to Stanford, thus diverting traffic to the west side of town, putting it in the lap of Chiron. It seems to me is crass disregard for the serious traffic problems that will occur in the very near future. This is 1994. We're talking about the year 2000 here. This is not the lightweight child's play that previous projects in Emeryville have been. However, it seems to me that these problems can be addressed. And taken in their entirety, the mitigation measures in the environmental impact report, with the exception of the deletion of Haven Doyle, an important one of 3 north-south arteries in the whole area, with the exception of the deletion of the Haven Doyle Street, it seems to me that in general, the mitigation measures do address the traffic problems. But by putting them off to the never-never land of Phase 2, you are in effect disregarding the urgent importance of these roadway and intersection improvements and making them highly unlikely ever to be built. Since the future of health care in the United States is highly speculative at this time, the reliance on an unknown Phase 2 at some future date which is very uncertain is not a reasonable approach to the absolutely necessary roadway and intersection improvements that will occur, that will be needed absolutely by the year 2000.
Oh, your 5 minutes are up, Mr. Getz.
Okay, can I have 30 seconds? Okay. Read it.
Will Richards.
Will Richards, resident of Emeryville. I think Andy's comments are well taken, and certainly traffic is probably the most important consideration in this project, and particularly in view of Chiron's future expansion. I'd like to assure the Commission, having served on the Housing Committee for 4 years, that there was indeed a protracted and sincere effort to provide housing in the Del Monte site, which unfortunately met with no success. I think staff did a very commendable job in attempting to provide housing there. We looked at 4 different projects. Unfortunately, none of them were able to come to fruition. I think, by and large, the Kaiser proposals sound, and from the point of view of a resident of Emeryville, I very much would like to see Kaiser come into town. I also think the mention of a break in the parking structure to provide San Pablo Avenue with more access to the Kaiser project is commendable, and would like to see that supported in your approval of the Kaiser project. I would urge your support of Kaiser's project at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Ken Scheidegg.
Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Kenneth Scheidegg. I'm the General Counsel for AC Transit. I'm not here to speak on behalf of AC Transit either for or against this project. We are, however, concerned about the amount of time that has been provided to AC Transit to read the response to comments. As you know, I have appeared before this commission for a number of times over the past couple of years trying to deal with problems that our facility has from time to time been perceived to create at Emery Bay Village, and we've attempted to work with this commission, and I think successfully work with this commission to resolve those problems. We obviously recognize that we will have a neighbor to the immediate south if you approve the Kaiser project, and we are interested in avoiding any problems with that neighbor that we have had with our other neighbors. To that end, especially since 45th Street is the major ingress and egress for our facility, which has over 300 buses located on it, we think we are entitled to, and we request an opportunity to make certain that we've had an opportunity to read through the response to comments, and to make certain that we are satisfied that the responses that we've put in have been addressed, that we have an opportunity to look over the conditions of approval and make certain that they address the concerns that we have. To date, we have not been able to do that, except for the fact this project allows you to have the assistance of certain consultants. Your staff is not much larger than that of AC Transit from the planning side, and therefore a 900-page document that we received approximately 10 days ago has not allowed our staff an opportunity to read through it. This is a concern to us mainly because you have to make a recommendation to the City Council. The City Council will be influenced by your recommendation, and it's not our point here today to say you should approve or not approve the project. However, it is assumed that when you approve the project, you are making an informed decision. And I think an informed decision means that everyone who is going to be affected by it, and specifically AC Transit is going to be affected by this project, if we stay there beyond the year 2000 and are one of the alternates that are selected, we want to make certain that we in fact have a good neighbor relationship with Kaiser. And we are at a disadvantage tonight to give you all of our comments so that you know our concerns and our response to those concerns. Our intent is not to be negative, but to try and find positive ways of dealing with you and with Kaiser to solve those concerns. But just as you have this evening received comments, ideas, suggestions, and conditions, you have not had an opportunity to look over those comments, ideas, conditions, and suggestions, and yet you're being asked to pass upon the item tonight. And I presume, having experienced public hearings for a number of years, that the Commission isn't going to stop the process and take an hour or two to read over everything you received this evening. We would request the Commission to grant a continuation of this hearing for an additional week so that we would have an opportunity to provide you with the information that we would like to provide to you. That additional week would also provide you with an opportunity to review the information that you have received this evening in written form and to digest it and to determine whether or not there are ideas contained in that information that should be incorporated in your recommendation to the City Council. So I have provided to your Planning Director copies of a letter that we have prepared this evening and distributed to the Planning Director, and we would again request that you continue this matter at least for one additional week so that you can hear the thoughts of AC Transit on this matter. Thank you.
Mr. Marks.
My name is Jonathan Marks, and I am an Emeryville homeowner. The EIR says that this project would have significant negative impacts on the environment. Big surprise. What major project anywhere in the Bay Area wouldn't? But opponents of this project who have their own political agenda are using the EIR as a wedge to break this project apart in order to get it for Oakland. The Kaiser Hospital, they imply, in Emeryville, will pollute the water, will pollute the air, will threaten the animals, will cause gridlock, and will make the sky fall down. And it will be incompatible with its neighborhood. However, what would a Kaiser Hospital in Oakland do? Freshen the air? Restore the ecological balance? Make the bay teem with fishes? Make the traffic flow? Will it be compatible with its neighbor, the Fox Theater? No to all of these. The Oakland site would have every significant negative impact of an Emeryville site, and then some. You can look it up in the Volume 3 of the EIR. I am here to give an expert opinion as to the compatibility of the Kaiser Hospital with the Fox Theater. Why am I an expert? Two reasons. First, it's in my blood. My grandmother's family, the Graumans, built and operated a lot of theaters in this state. After the 1906 earthquake debilitated every theater in the Bay Area, they opened the first new one in a tent off Market Street in San Francisco. And in Los Angeles, they built two of the nation's most fabulous movie palaces, Grauman's Chinese and Egyptian theaters. And second, just incidentally, I'm an expert by training. I have a doctorate in theater from Yale University. Now, my expert opinion about the plan to wrap a hospital around a theater is, what, are you crazy? A hospital and a theater are totally incompatible. Is this some kind of new concept of one-stop shopping, taking a high comedy and a high colonic all at the same time? Action-adventure flicks augmented with real sirens? Or is the plan to leave the Fox Theater derelict, quiet for the hospital patients? Well, I don't know. This is city planning beyond me. It won't go on the Fox site because it doesn't belong there. It won't go on the Laney College site because the people of Oakland turned it down. It should go on the Emeryville site because Kaiser wants it there, and the people of Emeryville, through our elected government, seem to want it there. And we have a dedicated professional staff of planners who have demonstrated that they know how to maximize the strengths and mitigate the weaknesses of a project. Though, of course, all they've worked on is, what was that now? Lightweight child's play? Well, I just heard that. I just heard that. We're trying to build a hospital that will be an asset and a credit to the city and to the entire region. We are going about this responsibly, methodically, openly, and democratically. Now, some of our opponents, not all of them, but some, want to thwart this legitimate progress. Since they can't accomplish their ends democratically, they will do it through legal obstructionism, abusing the courts, the hospital, and the people with baseless, meritless lawsuits. Since they have no credible alternative to offer, they resort to half-truths, untruths, obfuscation, and insults. The people of Emeryville are justifiably proud of the caliber of our elected officials, their appointed commissioners, and our professional staff. Even though we may not agree on every project, we're proud of what they have done for our city. When people come here and insult them, treating them like ignorant, vicious, redneck outlaws running a frontier mining town, they're insulting us. And it doesn't sit well. A case in point. In the Tribune, a representative of the Legal Aid Society called us sleazy for going ahead with this project. Now, I can't imagine how the Legal Aid Society is concerned, but they ought to be ashamed. Another case in point, the Honorable Jerry Brown. Now, he's got an interest in the health of downtown Oakland. We all do, of course. His interest is a bit more tangible than most. He's got $1.25 million invested in downtown real estate, and he's got his future sunk in a media and political career in Oakland. More power to him. More power to him. But when he comes into this chamber a few months ago, and I've been waiting 4 months to reply, he didn't speak of self-interest. He had the gall to claim that he was speaking in the name of morality, and he pointed at you and he said, and I quote, "I say there is a racist component here, and you can deny it all you want, but just walk down the street and you'll see it." Racist, ladies and gentlemen, that is scurrilous. Since you're listening for once, I will tell you it is untrue and it is extremely offensive. And as if you didn't know, it represents the ugliest form of political mudslinging, and it is dishonorable, Jerry Brown. But he's chosen to advance this project as his new hobby horse, which he's riding to advance his political, media, and real estate interests, so he doesn't stop there. Told the Berkeley Voice, Emeryville is gluttonous in their appetite for excessive development.
No, it's
gluttonous. Quiet. Gluttonous, he said. But he's sitting over there in Oakland, licking his chops. I suggest the absence of order, Madam Chairman. The time has not run out, but they're yelling at me. Gluttonous. He's sitting over there in Oakland, licking his chops, gluttonous, staring greedily at the project on our plate.
Mr. Marks, Mr.
Berkeley
Marks.
Insider, he said, Emeryville is like a dog in heat for every developer that comes along.
Mr. Marks, your time's up.
Thank you.
The next 5 speakers, please. Could I have some order? Stanley Maraca from the City of Oakland. Stephen Galvez. Elnora Ramsey. Sidoria Williams. And Stephanie Garaban-Sierra. Could we have Stanley Maraca, please?
Come on, people, let's get up here.
Stan Mario.
I believe he might have left. Am I not pronouncing it correctly?
Muraoka.
Marioka.
Stan.
He submitted a letter.
Did he? Okay. Stefan Galvez. Elnora Ramsey. Okay. Go.
Good evening. I'm Stefan Galvez. I'm representing Caltrans, District 4. Caltrans is still in the process of reviewing the final EIR and the responses that have been provided to our comments. We have significant concerns regarding the adequacy of these responses. Caltrans hasn't had enough time to review these comments, and given the significance of these projects and the impact that it may have on interstates 80, 580, 980, State Routes 13, 24, and 123, we would also like to request an extension of time to analyze the responses to the final EIR. Tonight we're providing you with a preliminary response to some of the EIR replies. Again, since parts of the document are still being reviewed, we request that additional time extension be granted. These are some of the comments that we have made in regard to the responses. If you have any additional questions, we'll be available to respond to them.
Elnora Ramsey. She's not here? Okay, how about Sidoria Williams? Okay.
Thank you. To everyone, I am Sidoria Williams, and I live in Emeryville. I am part of Phase 1 and am on the relocation committee. I am making a comment as a citizen, not as a member of the committee. Upon reading Phase 1 and the provisions that Kaiser has made for the relocation of all of the ones that are affected by it, I feel that it is a fair and equitable plan for everyone, that this Kaiser project is beneficial from every point of view. Upon the first presentation that they made at the Senior Center in May of 92, or May of 92, I have been in favor of the move. Change is good for everyone. It will be an improvement for everyone concerned.
Stephanie?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Garabrandt Sierra. I'm an attorney with the Legal Aid Society of Alameda County. Most of my comments I have written there and distributed among you, and you have them. But there's a couple of other things that I'd like to bring up, and one of those regards notice. I am very concerned that we and other members of the public did not have an adequate time period in which to study the comments and responses to comments. Excuse me. I received my first notice by certified mail, and I didn't receive it till Thursday. And when I received this document, as you know, it's 930 pages long, and the staff report wasn't available. The staff report wasn't available till Monday, and that's over 300 pages. I found these documents very confusing to read, and I could not make too much sense out of them in the short period of time I had to review them. This is particularly troubling in light of the fact that in a public place, Mr. Edwards guaranteed that, we wouldn't think of doing any planning decisions until the public had 3 or 4 weeks to look at the document. Now we find this coming up like this is. Well, I had concerns, and counsel for Emeryville gave me a call yesterday and tried to allay my concerns and said, well, don't worry, nothing final is going to happen tonight. Look at your notice. So I looked at my notice, and she was right. It said that the purpose of this meeting was so that you could recommend to the City Council to make certain actions. And it would only be a recommendation, and that I could make comments later. However, and I said, but wait a second, it says that you know that you have to make comments on the record on a certain date, or else you're foreclosed from legally bringing a challenge. He says, don't worry about it because, this is only a recommendation. Well, today, you should see the agenda that came out yesterday that I saw for the first time. It says that they're asking you to certify the final EIR, when the notice said that you would recommend to the City Council to certify the EIR. And those are two different things. As you know, the notice is different from the agenda, and that's very serious. I am very concerned that people aren't going to be able to give comments for the record on the final EIR if you choose to certify it today. And in open court today, that counsel for Emeryville said again, there would be plenty of time to give comments on all decisions relating to the Kaiser Emeryville Hospital before the 21st meeting. And I hope that that's true. And I hope that includes the final EIR, because from this agenda, it seems like they're asking you to certify the EIR. Thank you.
Okay, the balance of the speakers, and there are about 7 of them, so I'm going to read them all now. James Heiser from We the People. I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I think it's important to clarify for the record now, with respect to the agenda, the item that our last speaker referred to. The agenda refers to a request for certification of an environmental impact report. That meaning that the Planning Commission would be making a recommendation to the City Council in the form of a request that they certify the final EIR, not that the Planning Commission is certifying the final EIR.
Thank you.
James Heiser, Christian Peoples, L.B. Stanferry, Michelle Molyneux, Jim Kosteka, Janice Jackson, and Odessa Hall, and Frank Stern.
Good evening. I am a Kaiser member. I'm also working with We the People, volunteering, working with phone banking. I just wanted to briefly respond to something someone said earlier about some sort of sinister funding, why, who was paying for us to do this. I wanted to mention that there is no funding for We the People's involvement against Kaiser. It's all volunteers. We have people supplying a little bit of phone service for us, and it's just people who want things to be different. I'm here from Walnut Creek. I have a sort of a different perspective. I hear a lot of people speaking on behalf of Oakland and, of course, Emeryville. I'd like to see someone discussing what would be best for the Bay Area. I'd like to see some Bay Area planning. That's why I'm involved. My perspective as an outsider, basically my impression of Emeryville in the past has been mainly traffic. And to hear that they're going to build this monster facility in Emeryville, it just right off the bat, that just doesn't make sense to me. I also want to mention this is my first time at a meeting like this. I actually didn't plan on speaking when I came. I was very excited on the way just to witness it, and I have to say that I'm really disappointed. I guess I don't know if this is the way they normally go, but I didn't expect so many people pointing fingers. I was amazed how many times Jerry Brown's name came up. I'm not surprised it came up, but I mean, we should be talking here about whether Kaiser should be in Emeryville, not whether Jerry Brown is for it or against it, or why he's for it or against it. I don't understand that at all. As far as the traffic issue, I wasn't aware of this, but I recently have discovered, I guess this is one of many projects of this magnitude that are going on in Emeryville. That really amazes me. Even if this were the only one, I would be opposed to the concept of so much development. Especially a regional facility that will be drawing people from as far as away as Walnut Creek, where I'm coming from. One other thing, if I were a resident here, I would be extremely concerned about a lot of the discrepancies that have been brought up this evening. I didn't hear anyone murmuring. There was a lot of reaction to what Jerry had to say. I think a lot of people came up here and said, well, this says this and this says that. This is a contradiction. I didn't notice a lot of response. People who are for this seem to really just before it, whatever is said. Along those same lines, I didn't hear anyone who's for the project who was concerned about the incredibly small amount of time that was given to read a huge document. I don't understand, I can understand that you're for it, but it just seems to me the people who are for it aren't reading that document, or they would be concerned as well about the fact that there wasn't time to read it. I think there's a little bit of trust going on that might be a little bit misplaced. My experience with some of the activists I've worked with from Emeryville through We the People is that frequently these discrepancies wind up being empty promises. I can't come up with specifics. I'm not super versed in this issue, but I know in the past there have been talk about benefits from other projects. The project comes along, the area is developed, the benefits don't occur. I guess that's pretty much it. Oh, I'm sorry. There is one last thing. I've talked with a lot of people about this issue. This is not a huge concern of yours, but I believe there are some Kaiser representatives here. I would say maybe 1% of the Kaiser members that I've talked to aren't extremely concerned about this. I can understand that's not your first priority. I can't believe Kaiser, they have tens of thousands of people in Oakland that they're causing to come here.
Christian Peoples.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Chris Peoples. I'm the Vice Chair of the Piedmont Avenue Neighborhood Improvement League, the immediate neighbor to Kaiser, and I'm making comments tonight on their behalf, and I'll make a couple on my own behalf. I thought my comments were going to be fairly technical and boring, and now after Mr. Marks's performance, I think I'm going to be really boring. Let me first make a couple of technical comments. We received the notice of the availability of this document on the 28th of November. It was put in our box, and I'll supply you with a photocopy of that. We weren't able to pick it up till the 29th. That was a Saturday. Luckily, through Mr. Edwards had told us pretty much when this was coming out, so we were able to get it a little bit earlier than that. But that seems to me very limited notice. The other issue I think has already been dealt with by council, the fact that the EIR, the notice talked about recommendation. I assume that means that the record is going to be open so I can get some of the stuff in writing until the 21st. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Let me make some substantive comments then. Our major concern has to do with the existing 12-story building in Oakland. Mr. Edwards had a letter that came in August, and then your entire master response, B1, deals with that issue. We don't think it's been dealt with adequately. We understand and are sympathetic with the fact that what's going on with health care is very much up in the air. Maybe if we all vote for 186, everybody will get health care, and Kaiser will be very busy, and I think it'll be great. But we're very concerned that because of the existing hospital zoning, basically so long as it remains in a medical mode, there won't be any opportunity to analyze what goes on there. And we feel that moving that from inpatient to outpatient, which is listed as one of the possibilities, will have an enormous impact on our neighborhood. The inpatient, or the outpatient uses, you have enormously more parking and traffic impacts, and that's obviously a difficult problem in our neighborhood. So we believe that's an inadequacy in the plan, and would ask you to direct Kaiser to use their crystal ball a little bit more, or perhaps if all they will do is put some sort of commitment that there will be an environmental document and there will be a review if this goes to outpatient, that would be satisfactory for us, because it's just got to be looked at. It's not insoluble, but it needs to be looked at. Three other substantive comments. Our letter was 64, so 64C at page 352 of this document talks about upstream traffic impacts from Broadway and MacArthur. Broadway and MacArthur is at a condition C in 2010. There's got to be some upstream impacts on Howe, Piedmont, and Moss, which are the next streets over. This sort of goes along with what the city of Berkeley said at page 240, that the geographic area that within the traffic analysis is too small. And I agree with that, and disagree with both the specific comment at 64C and also the general comment in the front about that. 64G, comment 64G at page 352, talks about the shuttle issue. And once again, we've had a problem with Kaiser over the years being too balkanized, and this response illustrates that. What we're talking about is the fact that there's an existing shuttle from Kaiser to MacArthur. There's going to be a shuttle, if you build this project, from Emeryville to MacArthur. But one of the things that they've talked about the existing Fabiola building, is that it's quite important that have access to the hospital. So somehow those shuttles need to be merged so that you've got one loop. The last comment I'll make is substantive comment I'll make is at 64H, page 353, which is a comment that I just think is absurd. We raised, a problem with bicycles in Oakland, and the response to that is that bicyclists generally ride outside the lanes of travel, and increases in traffic volume will not inhibit the ability of cyclists to access the MacArthur BART station. I don't know what cyclists they're talking about, but I sure have to dodge them in my car, and I have to dodge cars when I'm on my bicycle in the traffic lanes. So that really does need to be looked at. Let me just make a final comment, which is my own comment, and not necessarily that of panel, and that is...
Your time.
I don't get to make it. It's okay. Thank you.
L.B. Stanferry. Michelle.
Hi, Council. Thank you for listening to all of us in what's going to be a long evening. My name is Michelle Molyneux. I live at the Emeryville Business Center, and I'm directly impacted by this project. I'd also like to say that I'm an Emeryville resident. I'm a member of BAC, the Bay Area Coalition on Kaiser, and that I was here when this argument started and people called us NIMBYs, and I was here when they called us artists, and I was here when they called us other things, and now that they're calling us outsiders, I'm still here, and I'll be here at the end of this fight. There's been a lot of comments tonight, and I'm going to save my comments for the November 21st meeting, which I had to find out we could extend the comment period on. I'm going to address my concerns also about the notices that were given and the amount of time that was given for this highly complex document. When you have AC Transit and when you have Caltrans come up here and ask for an extension period because they clearly don't understand that they have until November 21st to finish their comments, something's wrong. You've heard all the arguments. You've heard the thing about the notices. I just want to reiterate that I was at that meeting that Kip Edwards spoke to us, the members of BAC. There were 30 members there, and he did say that we would have 3 to 4 weeks to review these documents. But that notwithstanding, I know the notices were in the letter of the law. I also want to address the notice for the November 21st meeting, which really isn't your concern, but the city released that document. It says the shell mound on it. It says no reference to Del Monte. It says no reference to Kaiser. I cannot tell you, as someone who's been in this fight, how many phone calls I received about how confused people were about that notice. The people have no idea that that meeting is even about Kaiser. They have no idea that they have an extension period for these documents. I'm not here to comment tonight on what your recommendation to the board will be to the city council, but I do ask that you put an addendum on that recommendation and that you ask for an extension period. This is a highly complex document. As everyone has said here tonight, has brought up the issues of traffic. Clearly those are unanswered questions. For the people that support this document, they should be able to write it out. If it's a good document, we can wait for it. But to rush it through when there are still so many complex questions it's just horrendous. It's uncalled for. We need an extension. I would like to see a 30-day extension. We had it on the first one. We had it on the first EIR. I think this requires no less time. And I just want to reiterate Sue Blackman's comments, okay? Most sick people don't take public transportation. Therefore, we have a traffic problem. It needs to be clearly addressed. People need to have clear answers on this, and until they are, I ask for an extension. Thank you.
Jim Kostecka.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, concerned citizens, my name is Jim Kostecka, and I'm with We the People. I'm a San Leandro resident, and I'd like to thank the people who've addressed the discrepancies that have been taking place in relation to this issue. I'd also like to thank the people for some of the lighthearted performances we've seen. But I'd like to ask, how serious or how funny is healthcare? In an issue where many times life and death is decided in seconds, how funny is it? One of the things that we're discussing tonight is that question. And this is an issue that goes beyond Oakland and Emeryville pride. This is an issue that touches people's lives. Kaiser should be in Oakland. The resources, the infrastructure is there. It's close to the people. It's closer to the most people. It benefits the Bay Area community and not just Oakland. And the environmental impact to Emeryville will not be slight. The hospital in Oakland, as I've said, in Oakland, is centrally located. It has greatest access to the most people through the BART, through public transit. One person commented tonight that sick people would avoid taking public transit. I have friends who go to Berkeley College, and they have no other way to get to the hospital. And as I understand it, the nearest BART station to the Emeryville Hospital will be 3/4 of a mile. And I can't see them walking that far when they're sick. We need to have the hospital. It makes more sense to have the hospital where the most people have access to it. And as a colleague just pointed out to me tonight, really, the distinction between Emeryville, Oakland, and all the cities are really arbitrary lines on the map. We're a Bay Area community. I believe we all want a healthy community and not pockets of prosperity surrounded by despair. If you take away the hospital, or if the hospital moves from Oakland, you'll be taking away jobs, and you'll be taking care further away from the people who most need it, the poor. What we want is a prosperous Bay Area community, and not fortress communities surrounded by pockets of crime. The EIR has been, the EIR has been addressed on several occasions tonight, and I think, again, the traffic will be increased. There's no need to create infrastructure for the highways, a transportation infrastructure when one already exists in Oakland. The smog, the pollution that will come as a result of all the new traffic should be considered, and I do urge everyone to read the EIR. That should be read before you make your decision. And the shell mound. At one point, that should have been a national treasure. I think if we destroy what's left of it, we'll be doing ourselves a great disservice. And I recommend that people find out about it. The anthropology professor at Berkeley can tell you all about it. So let's get beyond the personal attacks, the personal pride, and let's do what's right for the community as a whole, the common good, and for the people. Thank you.
Janice Jackson.
I'm a homeowner, and I live on 59th Street, 1047 59th Street in Oakland. I'm a member of SPGEA. I'm a member of the AC Transit Transbay Task Force. I'm a director of the Friends of the Golden Gate Library, and I work a lot with the community garden near the Golden Gate Elementary School. I have lived in this neighborhood for 6 years, and I really care about this neighborhood. I want to see Oakland and Emeryville improve, and I think that you've done an awful lot. It's a nicer place to live than it was 10 years ago, and I think you deserve a lot of credit for that. I've been given a lot of thought to this project, and I've been trying to read the EIR and understand what it says, and I find it very hard, and I also find that I need more time to understand it. My main concern is very selfish. It is purely the traffic issue at this point in time, because that's the only thing that I can focus on. On my small side street, between 7 o'clock in the morning and 8:30, a car passes it every 6 seconds, and cars go by very quickly. There are children on our street, and they can't play in the street. It's very dangerous. I'm afraid when Kaiser comes in, that will only increase. To make a left-hand turn from my street onto San Pablo is a problem at some point, sometimes of the day, and I have to go around, so I don't do that. You mentioned widening the streets, and I understand that one of the proposals is to eliminate the on-street parking on San Pablo Avenue. I go to the City Yoga Ashram, and I drive there at night because it's not always safe to walk even that block and a half. I depend on being able to park on that in that area. Tonight, for example, if you had gone into that area, there were no places to park anywhere near there. On Friday afternoons, right now, it can take from San Pablo to the freeway 15 to 20 minutes to drive that area. I am really concerned that if there was a major fire in Emeryville, that the fire station is here, and with the traffic backed up along, what's going to happen? Are all of the people living in Emeryville going to have access to the fire trucks? Are they going to get there in time? Like I said before, I really appreciate all of the work Emeryville is doing to improve this area. I want it to be a nice place to live. However, I am afraid Emeryville is not acting wisely right now, and that you're looking more at the short-term benefits rather than the long-term goals. The decisions that you make tonight will have significant impact on us now and the generations that will follow. From what I have seen and read, and I have not read all of that report, I admit that, I think that Kaiser would better serve the community by building their great hospital not in Emeryville, but in downtown Oakland. It will help. There's public transportation near there, already in existence, and it will help people getting to and from the hospital. I just really hope that you truly consider what you're about to do and that you do the right thing. Thank you.
Odessa.
Good evening. I'm Odessa Hall, and I live at 5872 Booter Street. I have a very deeply vested interest in the city of Emeryville. I have a lot of history regarding the city of Emeryville and also regarding the city of Oakland. I feel very honored to be here because from the concept of Kaiser planning and designing the project here for the city of Emeryville, before it came to the Planning Commission, I don't know who honored me, but I was informed. I was sent a little card and informed the various steps that was being taken and invited to appear at the hearings. They did this to me when I was in the hospital. After I got out of the hospital, where I was forbidden to come to the meetings, because of my doctor, but I have been informed. Now, it amazes me that the people come up and state that they did not get enough notice. I, who was in the hospital and convalescing for a year or so, did receive notices, constant notices. But something else that I'm very interested in is the fight. The fight that's right. Look what they've done to Oakland. Whenever you have a group like this coming out to fight a project, you frighten the developers. No one has that kind of money to let a small group come in and decide this is not best for the city. They've done this to Berkeley, and now they're coming here because we're making some progress to do it to Emeryville. And I don't particularly like that, because when you do that, whenever you have a referendum of some kind, you stop progress. And people move on. You don't stop the developers and you don't stop the companies. You just prevent yourselves from growing. And I think that we should consider there's some things we're going to always have. What they say, sure thing. What, death and taxes? It's a sure thing. Traffic is another one you can add to it. But I would like for you to consider, and I would like for these people to consider, you got history. Go down and look at the records. Check the minutes of Oakland and see what impact that a small group of people came in and stopped the project. They kept postponing it. And pretty soon, what do you got? What? A city of scavengers. Nothing there, because you've had people like this coming in and objecting to it. You can't buy them because there's no money there. There's nothing you can do but stop progress, and this is what they're doing. And I sincerely hope that you will consider it and suggest that they go down and check the minutes of the Planning Commission, check the minutes of the Council, and see what progress they made the last 10 years. And they've got nothing to show for it. You got a new project now in Jack London Square because the original project was stymied because people came in objecting to it, threatening lawsuits. And people move on. They come up with various excuses. They say they're broke, but they go other places and develop. Please consider it.
Frank Stern.
Madam Chairperson, members of the Planning Commission,
My name is Frank Stern. I'm an Oakland resident, but I have been a property owner in Emeryville for almost 20 years of commercial properties, some of which are located just a block or two away from the proposed Kaiser project. As a person who's appeared before this august body as a humble supplicant for applications in the past, I want to share a secret with you, and that is the moment of greatest leverage is now. That means that the secret document in this vast stack of paper is the instrument called Conditions of Approval. I was surprised to see in the 2,000 page document that the conditions of approval number a half a dozen pages, far less than the vast array of conditions of improvement that this august body has imposed on my tiny little 10, 20,000 square foot projects. I think what I'd like to bring to your attention is that the phase 1 of this project is certain. Phase 2 is not certain. The key issue is traffic. I strongly agree with the point raised by Andy Getz that the phase 2 traffic mitigation conditions should be brought forward and made a condition of this project now. Once it's built, if they don't build phase 2, it ain't going to happen. As I read the responses to my comments, which was letter number 74, wherein I commented that I thought the traffic mitigation measures were inadequate. I mentioned last time, and I'll repeat again, removal of cars on street, you know, that's like getting a 5,000-gallon tanker truck, filling it up with red paint, and spritzing the sides of the sidewalks with red paint. That's not what I call, you know, spending real money. This is a $250 to $300 million project. It's big. 3, 4, 5% is not very much money. In percents, 7.5, 10 million bucks. And I think those are the numbers that Andy has in his proposed changes. Number 6. Well, I said 3%, 7.7 million. In that regard, getting more narrow to my own point of view, I had made comments to the EIR, and I was very disappointed in the responses. It read to me like a document prepared by attorneys. Being a businessman, I can recognize when attorneys write documents. Very little said, minimal response. Responses like, the author's comments are noted. Very meaningful. Responses like, yes, the author's comment that it will be a significant unavoidable adverse impact is a correct observation, to me does not represent a meaningful response to my letter number 74. Particularly and specific to my own very small minor interest, my building on Stanford, I commented that the loss of 14 spaces represents 10%, I'll make it a different way this time, 10% of the 140 spaces on-street parking removed. And I am 1 out of 40 businesses impacted, so I'm 2.5%, but I'm enjoying 10% of the hit. The response to that school with the parking, the loading thing that you folks approved was, the response from the consultants was, we'll study it in the future to whether we're going to widen or how we're going to respond to that. I don't think that represents a significant, appropriate response. My comments on inadequate parking, inadequate loading was, there is sufficient parking, sufficient loading. I strongly recommend you look back in the EIR document to Kaiser's own words and then reflect back on that. Quickly on Appendix E, I think the association Kaiser coverage for residents should expand it to include both business owners, Emeryville business owners and Emeryville employees. Thank you very much.
That is the end of my speaker cards, and before we close the public hearing, I would like to know if there's anybody else who wants to speak who didn't send in a card. Okay.
Chris?
Yes,
Excuse
sir.
me, before you close the public hearing, can we have a brief recess after this speaker?
I was planning on closing the public hearing and then having a recess. You'd rather?
No, I don't want you to close it yet.
Okay, all right.
Hi, I'm sorry I didn't get a card in. Jerry Carnelia.
I just wanted to, I live at the corner of 55th and Doyle, and I wanted to second my neighbor's comments, Joan Brown, who talked about the Doyle Haven Street corridor there. And I won't go over that again. I just want to say again, I'm very concerned about that should be firmed up before permit is given, please. You know, and listening to the number of things that are having to be changed, I'm kind of just wondering, what are the limits on the project? How can we set some limits on the project at the time the permit is given so that it doesn't get out of hand? I mean, once the permit is given, where does it end? You know, I mean, I'm a little concerned about that. I mean, they need to rezone? Okay. They need to go up to 150 feet instead of just 50 feet? Okay, we'll say all right to that. Got to change the general plan? Okay. But did I hear you say, you know, that one of the problems that could not be mitigated was air quality? Can't be mitigated. That's okay with everyone. Gee, I went to a lot of trouble to quit smoking a while ago, and I, you know, kind of wanted to breathe clean air for a while. But anyway, so I guess I want to recommend to the city council, you know, that you know, I mean, that if you guys could recommend, as you pass this thing up, that the circulation problem, you know, be, you know, dealt with up front instead of, you know, in the year 2000 at the end of phase 1, as Frank Stern was saying, and that we determine some kind of limits of how big this project is going to get before the permit is given. Please. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to now take a 15-minute recess.
I think there was one other speaker.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Kay Maston, and I live at 5912 Fremont Street, Fremont and 59th. And I live in Oakland, but I'm hard on the Emeryville border. One of the things I'd like to say this evening is that I strongly resent being called a hack coming in from out of town. I live in Emeryville. My address is Oakland, but I live in Emeryville. I'm very, very worried about the traffic impact of this hospital. We can barely support the traffic impact of Trader Joe's. I don't really understand how it is that we can put a hospital on Hollis Street and not feel the impact of the additional cars that are going to be traveling in that corridor. I would like you to reconsider the downtown Oakland site and really give some hard thought to the impact of this hospital in this very fragile community. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we'll now take a 15-minute break and then reconvene. I am not going to close the public hearing tonight because it is the responsibility of the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the City Council. And there were several speakers tonight who have indicated that they did not have enough time to review the EIR response. In addition to that, we have received a whole lot of written comments that we have not had an opportunity to review. And we simply would like to assure all members of the public that we want to basically make our recommendation to the City Council when we're fully aware and we fully dealt with all of the recommendations and all of the requests from the public and for the new requests that we had tonight. So therefore, we're not going to close the public hearing. We're going to continue it until a week from tonight, next Thursday night at 6:30. And for all of those of you who feel here, same place, same time, and all of those of you who feel that there are additional comments that you need to make, please make them then, and we will deal with them at that time. In addition, since the traffic and the apparent conflicts in the EIR about the key issues on the traffic seem to not have dealt with sufficiently in the opinion of some of the speakers, I'm going to recommend that we shall have our consultant make a more detailed presentation on traffic impacts at the next meeting and on the timing of the construction and the mitigation measures at the meeting on November 10th. So therefore, I guess one question, do any of the commissioners wish to make any comments tonight on any of these issues, or do we just want to reserve our comments?
Well, go ahead.
I would like to have our consultant on the urban design guidelines make a presentation at the next meeting, and to see how Kaiser has complied with the guidelines that were given to
I
them.
spoke with Mike Piatak this afternoon, and he is not going to be available next week.
I have a comment, and that is that if we get another 50 people next week that are going to speak, and we haven't said anything, I mean, I can't hold it back any longer. I got to say something. And I think I've just said it, so I'm fine. Let's just go.
Well, I sincerely hope that the comments from the people are meant sincerely, and that those who have already had their issues discussed will abstain from speaking again, and hopefully it will just be restricted to the people who sent in their written comments tonight, and for staff to deal with some of the comments that were made by the audience tonight that we have not responded to, and that they felt, maybe we needed to clarify.
Is that possible?
Excuse me, Madam
Yes,
Chair. I think it's also important that we make it clear that although we are continuing this hearing until next week, that the opportunity for public comment on these actions and the EIR will continue through the action of the City Council
On November 21st.
on November 21st.
Thank you. So, unless there are any further comments, this meeting is adjourned.